Before we start the agenda, if I may, I've heard from a couple of council members that this will be very quick. Both will be very, very quick. The first one, Mrs. Henley has reached out to me and asked me, along with her, to talk to Tom Frame, who's the chairman of the Beach and Waterways Commission. And Mrs. Henley is recommending that they take on looking at the event homes. And Tom Frame not only said they'd like to do it, he was very encouraging that he thought he could find a solution. And being as event homes are not just at Sandbridge, they're at the north end of the beach, they're on the bayfront as well. So that might be a good approach. We're just going to go ahead and get that done, but I wanted the council to know that that was occurring. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to say that, to make certain that we've got the input from all of the affected stakeholders, because it's not just one area, it's every place. And in talking with Tom Frame, he feels that the makeup of his committee is such that they have representatives from all of these areas, and so this way we can be sure that we're getting the input from all of them. And so I think that's probably a good thing, and it would take that, then we would be sure that we've covered it with the whole city.
Dave, you'll do a letter to the chairman and get that started. And
Yes,
then
sir.
one other thing, and John promised to be real quick too. John Ern wants to talk about parking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, the council had moved to make several changes to the resort parking program.
Right.
Based on the committee work that was done there. We have started to implement that for this season, and a lot of good things are coming from that, including making the employees accountable for their parking permit and signing a code of conduct and those types of things. Part of what it is that we had enacted based on that committee's recommendation was increasing the parking fee for the residential parking program from $25 a year to what we asked, which is $20 a month. And subsequent to implementing it, I think that we had an overreach on that in terms of charging too much, at least in the initial term. And so I'm going to pass out an ordinance that I'd like for council to consider perhaps to put on the agenda for next week that would reduce it to $10 a month, which is still a market increase from what it was before. All the other things that we had enacted are actually being implemented. I would only ask that we do it quickly because we're already issuing passes, and if we are going to reconsider it, I'd want to do it before we got too far.
So
down
bring
the
forward
road.
next week.
Yes, if I could. please.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, now I'll give the meeting back to the city manager. And the first briefing is the Tourism Development Financing Program. You want to do the introduction here, Dave?
I'm happy to do that, and in response to Councilman Moss, I defer to you if you'd like to make a comment as we are presenting this at your.
Well, at council's direction at my initial request, but I have no comment to make. I'd like to use time efficiently, and let's move out.
Yes, sir. And as such, we have been working diligently during the 60-day moratorium that was created as a result of receiving a deferral request on the part of the Development Authority when we had referred this action to them in accordance with our 17 November policy on the evaluation of use of the gap financing program. And so that has expired, and Deputy City Manager Doug Smith's going to lead us out. It's going to be very informatory in the beginning because I need to collect everybody's common thought back on the subject, and then we will conclude with my recommendations.
Very good.
All right,
Doug, we're glad to have you, buddy.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. So what I'm going to do, as Dave told you, is really sort of a three-part presentation. Give you a little bit of an overview or a review of the Tourism Development Financing Program itself, remind you of the legislation and the ordinances that you all passed, talk a little bit about our process and where we are in that process, then talk specifically about the 27th Street Hotel and Retail Project and that application. I will talk you through sort of what the project is, the process that we've gone through or went through evaluating that before the moratorium and since. One of the things you all asked was to get some industry inputs. We've done that through a series of meetings, and we'll tell you what some of that feedback has been. And as Dave said, we'll come back to you we'll come back to the manager with his assessment and some of his recommendations for both the policy and the Hyatt project. I would say to you that this has been very much a team effort. So Mark Stiles, Dana Harmeyer, Patty Phillips, others have been real involved. So as I go through this, if any of them feels like I have glossed over something or misstated something, I'd ask them to just to jump in. You'll remember, talked to you about this in January. You all adopted the policy back in 2012. At that point, the project requirements were pretty straightforward, still are. Had to have at least $30 million project, had to have taxable sales over $1 million. Certainly one of the goals is to increase increase employment. A question that's getting a lot of conversation is this question of tourism void, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. Obviously, it had to be located in a tourism zone, which you all adopted at the time, and it's essentially the oceanfront. Have to prove that there is, in fact, a financing gap, and that they would not need additional public investment. In November, following some changes that were made in the previous General Assembly session, you all adopted the changes that the General Assembly allowed. And in essence, we kept the same requirements in place. We actually goosed some of our requirements a little bit, some of your requirements a little bit, that it would have to be at least a $50 million project and create at least 50 full-time equivalent jobs. A lot of time, we've spent a lot of time, and one of the questions we're going to need, one of the policy conversations is really around redevelopment. And you all have heard me stand in front of you a lot in the last couple of years talking about redevelopment and the cost of redevelopment and the challenges of redevelopment, and yet there are some folks that believe that this is not the tool for redevelopment. So we want to talk a little bit about that. And then we spent some time saying about the idea that a new brand, or really a new flag coming in, would be an important piece. To date, the program has been used for the Cavalier Hotel project, and clearly an historic property, also a very high-end property, and so really no question about a tourism void in that particular project. We've talked about it for other properties, for other projects. We've talked about it perhaps for the Dome. We've talked about it for a headquarters hotel. We talked about it for the arena even. And we obviously went down a different path for the arena. But again, the Cavalier and now this project are the first two that we've considered. Just to remind everybody, there's a lot of moving parts in terms of players. And so council has a role, the authority has a role, the state has a role. Your role, in essence, is to look at our tourism plan, in our case, the resort area strategic action plan, and determine whether or not this project or any project that comes forward meets the deficiencies identified in that plan. And I would tell you that we've had a lot of conversation about the RACE app, and is the RACE app an effective tool for helping you make that decision of a plan that was put in place in 2008. And so we'll spend some time chatting about that, and the manager will have some comments on that at the end. And obviously, you've got to show that there is, in fact, a gap, and that financing is in fact needed. The Development Authority has a very important role, and it's why, when we left here last time, we went to the authority next, and their role is to essentially play that role of conduit for the money, but enter into the performance agreement. You'll remember the slide I put up for you that showed the money flow of sort of going from us and the state and the developer and back to the authority and ultimately back to the bank. And then the state has an interesting role in that the Virginia, and it's a multi-layered role and multiple steps in their process that involves the Virginia Tourism Corporation really validating, and their role, and I think it's important, their role is to help the community craft the strongest application that we can. And then the Virginia Resource Authority, VRA, their role is to show that, in fact, there is a gap lender and a gap loan in place. It isn't to validate the gap, but to say that there is a lender that is willing to step forward. But then ultimately, and this is about an 8-step process, the last one being, and we're in about step 1.5 right now. The Commonwealth of Virginia, the comptroller, is who ultimately issues the certification for the project. Our process, you'll remember, is us. Staff gets a proposal or an application and starts to do an evaluation. And if staff determines that application merits consideration, Then we bring it forward to the city council and to the development authority for briefings. And frankly, that's where we got in mid-January, and I'll show you the timeline in a minute. And at that point, you all sort of give a nod that you think it merits consideration, and then it goes to the authority for them to do similarly. Then we spend our time drafting, working with staff and the attorneys to draft and the developer to draft the performance agreement. And then ultimately it comes back to you all to adopt an ordinance. And you can see the things that you all say, but essentially you say that there's a void in the tourism plan and this meets it, and that it's okay to take our 1% tax and put back toward that gap, and that we will on a quarterly basis send that money over to the development authority. And ultimately, obviously, you're authorizing the city manager to enter into that performance agreement, assuming that the authority and the developer have entered into that agreement as well. And all of that then goes up to the state and particularly to the comptroller. But again, I think it's important to look at that yellow line. That's where we are in the process, and we'll come back to that a little bit in the manager's recommendation. So that's a really quick sort of the stuff you know, but I think it's important to set the context of the program itself. Now we'll talk about the 27th Street Hotel and Retail Project. Remind you of the steps that have been taken to date, and kind of what have we done and where have we been. Give you a quick overview of the project itself and kind of what we're talking about. Remind you of the analysis that we went through to bring it forward in January to say we think that it merits consideration. And those issues really involved, again, that question of consistency with the RACAP. Look at sort of how the resort is changing in terms of some of the offering of the hotel product and the evaluation that we went through. And then I will provide you with a summary of some of the industry feedback. Again, one of the things you all asked us to do was to make sure we got some input from the community, and we'll do that for you. All right, so where have we been? A proposal came into the SGA office this summer, and then we started working through that process. Came to you all for a presentation. Remember, I stood up here in early January and said we've got this proposal that's come in. We think it merits consideration, and we will take it to the authority, which we did. And on the 19th, the authority said, sent you all a letter. We made Patty and I made the presentation. They raised some concerns and sent a letter to you all that I think Vice Mayor Jones read that afternoon or the next week that said, essentially, we've got some concerns. We'd ask you to defer any and all applications under this program until the community, and especially the hotel community, the Chamber of Commerce, and others have had a chance to weigh in. Meanwhile, we're interacting. Remember that role of the VTC is to help us get the strongest application we can put forward. We got 3 letters. I call them the sort of the no, maybe, yes letters. The first letter that came back that said, you know, we don't see that you've made the case for filling the void. Then in mid-February, we got one back that said, you know, based on some information, we think that perhaps it could. And then finally, the letter on the 26th that said, we think that the information that we've seen merits the project moving forward, and we'll do anything we can to support you with that process. And one of the things that letter said, you'll remember, we'll talk about this again in a minute, is the fact that the project had started construction was not a violation of anything within the program. So after that letter from the Development Authority, you all said, let's take a time out. Let's take 60 days and not act on any applications under this program. And so that's what we've done. And so what we've done since then is obviously continued the evaluation of the financing, the construction costs and estimates, gathered that industry feedback, and met with Patty and Ron and a group of us, Todd Burke and some others, went up to Richmond to meet with VTC and just make sure we understood the process and the program and the intent. All right, so that's so then the project itself. You've seen all of this. There's really 3 components. There's a hotel component that's 156 rooms. We're talking about a Hyatt House. You've got retail that really is in 2 places. You've got, and I'll show you a picture in a moment, but you've got the retail that is on Atlantic and the boardwalk in the main tower. And back wrapping part of the garage that's back on Pacific Avenue. Also have a parking garage of 448 spaces. Again, this redevelopment conversation is I think, a really critical policy conversation because we as staff have looked at this as a really important part of what we're trying to accomplish down there. And obviously what we replaced were some obsolete properties. You've got a couple of hotels that were built circa 1970, and obviously the Dairy Queen, but a comparable number of rooms replaced with a higher quality product. The hotel is the first component, order of magnitude, depending on the season, 200 or 300 jobs, 156 rooms. And then Hyatt, and this has been a lot of conversation, and I'll give you some comments from the industry again in a minute, but a lot of conversations about quality and how does this fit in the pecking order of offerings down there. We've got a letter from Jim Tierney, who is the VP of Real Estate for Hyatt, that says this will be of higher quality of finish and service than any other product at the oceanfront other than perhaps the Hilton. And so then they make the argument that, and this is actually, I probably should have said this in the beginning. One of the things that I think, one of the mistakes I think we made in November is there's sort of terms of art and there's terms of industry. And we talk about star, is this a 4-star? Is it a 5-star? Is it a premium flag? Is it a premier flag? And what I think we and the industry have agreed to is there is a Smith Travel report that categorizes every hotel brand. And so we've really started to look at that report as the what I call the unbiased rating of these different brands. So you'll hear me talk about STR, which is the Smith Travel report that talks about upscale, upper upscale, and luxury hotels and the things that we are trying to put in place. But in their argument that it is a high-end property, higher than what's down there, is driven by the level of interior design, the oversized suites, the fact that you've got these kitchenettes, and again, a higher level of finish in the rooms themselves. The Hyatt brand, which is one of the things I talked to you about in the fall that we thought was important and a big deal, brings that new loyalty program. I'll make some comments about the hotel industry's take on that and the value of that in a few minutes. The retail piece, obviously this is 27th Street and essentially the oceanfront, about 20,000 square feet of retail, specialty shops, and signature restaurants. One of the things that we like is we think this gives us some year-round activity at the oceanfront that was not currently happening on this site. And then they have branded this as the Hyatt Connection. The garage, which would be on Pacific, and one of the things in the race app is to try and get that enhanced look and that better streetscape on Pacific. But you've got the garage wrapped with 8,000 square feet of retail, about 450 parking spaces. In this initial phase, while the spaces are publicly available, and given the 156 rooms and the 25,000 or so feet of retail, there'd be a couple, 100 to 200 spaces that would be available as sort of excess parking until the completion of phase 2 of the project. Obviously, an 8 or 9 story garage that would be maintained and operated privately. And again, I mentioned the Pacific Avenue aesthetics. Resort area strategic action plan. One of the basic tenets is, again, this idea to encourage redevelopment that shifts the hotel product to a higher level, to that upscale, upper scale kind of level. And obviously, one of our, you'll hear the manager talk about this, one of our interests is enhanced hotel tax revenue, but also the higher level of visitor in terms of income. Again, one of the questions that I think the community will want to answer and the manager will address is a program that was adopted in 2008. I mean, it's not a program, but a strategic plan that was adopted in 2008. And again, is it an effective tool for evaluating particularly the question of the void? But that is the plan that we adopted, that you all adopted, and it is the plan that we're using. And so when you look at the components of the Resort Area Strategic Action Plan that are addressed by this project, the enhanced visual access to the oceanfront, We've got significant upgrades to the 27th Street connector. We want to provide additional higher quality hotels. Obviously, this has done that, certainly compared to what was there. And you've got the 19-story product with oversized suites. The year-round focus, continuing to achieve that year-round resort feel. And we think that the suites gives you that longer off-season stay, but also the retail offerings help that piece as well. And this idea of creating distinctive districts in essence, and we think that the developer's concept of a Hyatt connection starts to address that. And we talk about concentrated retail, and you're getting 27,000 square feet of high-end retail in the project. And this starts to get to some of the interesting conversations we're having with the hotel industry and what's the role of the city in the redevelopment process and what's happening down there as we try to change some of the offering and enhance the demographics of the hotel guest. Redevelopment of the oceanfront, and obviously we were in a recession, but it's been fairly modest the last 10 years. You've seen an upper scale and a couple of upscale hotels that have come forward. We have seen the average daily rate go up relatively well, and we think that is driven in part by the upper scale and upscale rooms that have come on, some of the newer rooms. We had a presentation by Joe DeBerrio yesterday who talked about, in some ways, while things are increasing, they're really increasing at about the level of inflation. So we'd certainly like to see those increase more dramatically. Obviously, Jim Ricketts stands up here, has stood up here every year for about the last 5 or 6 and talk. We always tease him about another record year, but the reality is the revenues have continued to go up, and you can see the increases that we've seen. You can see the overall the rate increases that have happened there by category for upper scale and upscale, and it's just an order of magnitude. In 2006, we had we've gone up about 33% in terms of hotel revenue from 2006 to 2015. And again, we're seeing a pretty good increase in while the average income, for most folks has stayed pretty level. We've seen the income of our visitors go up pretty dramatically. In terms of the hotel, this hotel application or proposal compared to the criteria in the plan as it exists today, and these are the criteria that I went through for you just a minute ago. But does it have a minimum capital investment of at least $30 million? It does. Does it have taxable sales that are over $1 million annually? It does. Does it increase year-round employment? We think it does. This question of the tourism deficiency is really a policy question, and it is one that I think is part of what the council and the authority have got to address, and we've had a lot of conversation. I'll come back to that in a minute with the industry about that. But certainly, we were redeveloping a piece of property and providing a much higher level of product than was there. Does it include structured parking? Yes, it does. It has concentrated retail. It does streetscape improvements. And I'll talk a bit in a minute about the work that Patty and her team have done in terms of who they've talked to and the analysis that they've gone through on the gap. And then in order to qualify for the 30%, you can see the criteria there, but you've got to be at least $50 million, 50 employees. And again, right or wrong, we put a lot of emphasis in November on this idea of redevelopment. And again, this issue of the premium flag and bringing the new product or the new brand to the market. The analysis that Patty and her team have done is, in its simplest form, kind of comes down to this chart right here. And that is, what is the net fiscal impact of this project over 30 years? And you'll see sort of our analysis on the left, the developer's estimates on the right, and we see a net fiscal impact, and that is before you remit the 1% sales tax over the 30 years of approximately $70 million, and you take away the money that we would pay, and you've got a very, very strong, in simple dollars, $63 million net fiscal impact. The net present value of that, as inflation goes on, is closer to a real effect of $30 million. The gap has been identified, and you don't know, at approximately $23 million. And that's a number that's gotten a lot of play, but it's important to understand that there's three components to that. The city has a piece of that, 1%. The state provides 1%, and the developer provides 1%. So we think the net present value of those revenues for the city are somewhere between $5 and $7 million, and those would be the only direct funds, or there would not be any direct money paid out that wasn't generated by the project. So again, state share of $7 million, developer $7 million. I think it's important to note that in these conversations, in terms of the financial analysis, Patty and her team have worked with Dr. Fowler, have talked to all of the lenders in this case, and there's three lenders, to understand sort of what their take on the project is, what their role in the project is, whether they'll participate if we don't participate. Lots of conversation with Hyatt, and lots of conversation with Crestline, who would be the operator of the project. And so if you boil it all down, and maybe I should have said we would boil it down to 2 slides. If you boil it all down, you can look at what's been there and what would be there, or what's going to be there. And again, you can see the 156 rooms, which is a comparable number, but obviously a different quality. Much more retail, 27,000 square feet of retail. Annual sales that'll range somewhere between $17 and $27 million, so pretty significant. And then the taxes that are generated by that between real estate and personal property, and then of about $500,000 to the sales and occupancy of between $1.3 million and $1.9 million. Each year, and then obviously we've talked about the 200 to 300 employees. I'm sorry.
Back to the prior slide,
Yes,
please.
ma'am.
And I wanted to reiterate that the amount that the city would use as an incentive from year 1 is estimated at $266,000.
Thank you.
I think it's important that the amount is a small amount incrementally over a 30-year period.
Thank you, Patty. So one of the things you asked us to do was spend some time with the industry. I've met a couple of times by myself with members of the Hotel Association. Dave and I have been over there a couple of times. We've gotten a couple of letters from Joe DeBerrio, and this is not intended to be a comprehensive or a complete listing, but I think it's a pretty comprehensive listing of their concerns. One is this question of a void, and this really is going to be an important policy conversation of, does the project fill a tourism void? And then they're on record as saying they don't believe that it does. They question whether it has a positive impact on the local business community, and I think that's driven by some of the things you'll see on the next slide in terms of unfair competitive advantage. The idea, and that void question really gets into the idea that this category, that STR that we've talked about, of a Hyatt house that's in line with Hilton Garden and some others, that similar comparable product already exists at the oceanfront, and that it exists without incentive. There have been lots of conversations. There is concern that the construction costs have been inflated, but I would tell you that Patty's had a lot of conversations with not only folks in the hotel community, other developers, but the developer themselves. This idea that the Hyatt brand, which we think is important, can go away, and then obviously if they don't maintain or if things change, and that the Hyatt reservation system is frankly one of the smaller of the reservation systems, and that therefore we've overvalued the importance of bringing that system into place. I touched on this a minute ago, but the concern that we're giving an unfair competitive advantage to a developer versus hotel owners that have product in that same category, similar category. A lot of conversation about parking and concern that is there adequate parking for the employees of the project and the folks visiting the project, in addition to the hoteliers. And I think it's more about, is there really public parking that's available when all this is done? I would say to you that one of the things that's been attractive to staff on this is the fact that you do get structured parking. And, one of the options is to move forward with just surface parking, and I think that would put a real strain on the parking in that area. A concern that this program, if we move forward with this and similars, that we would open the floodgates for what they call subsidized redevelopment. And then finally, that they believe that some of the revenue projections were unrealistic that were coming from the proposal. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hanson.
All right.
Have a chair, Doug. You're
I'm
not
gonna
going
sit
far.
I'll sit back here.
All right, don't run away.
All right, David.
All right, members of council, this has been a very exhilarating exercise for the entire community, and there are a lot of feelings on this project, but I think it is just the vehicle by which we are reviewing the policies that we have in effect. So to get you all, since this is a workshop, to get you working, you have before you a copy of the City Council policy. I think it is extremely important that you know you got the right one when you turn to the back and you see that it has been officially signed by the staff and, of course, your mayor, and dated. And so what I'm going to do with all the information that Doug presented to you all today is I'm going to kind of rewalk this data in my assessment, and I'm going to grade out this project, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the issues that are associated with it. But we're not done with getting set up for that discussion. You heard Doug talk about STR. And on your desk in front of you, there was a handout, and everybody should look and find that, because I'm going to ask you to write some numbers down really quick, so that you understand an order of magnitude as we continue the staff's assessment with regards to understanding what is the product in your beach.
I'm looking for what you're asking, and I am struggling.
Okay, it's right there in front of you, right there, Amelia. No, in the city council policy, it's there.
Sitting on top of the blue. Okay, well, we keep looking. Maybe I stuck it somewhere. But keep going. I can follow along. I can write numbers down easy. Go ahead.
Have it either.
I'm
Okay.
Here's yours, Louis.
No, they were, Pam passed them out. They're all there. I'm sure Pam got them there. All right, everybody's got them. Julie, come back.
It's
Okay,
overlapping.
good. All right, at the top of your STR, I need you to write 7,755 rooms. 755 rooms are reported by STR, and this was reported as of July 2015. Now, if you'll notice, you have categories on your STR. You have luxury, and then, and we're kind of thinking we're going to have a Cavalier pop into that luxury, but right now, I really can't tell you got anybody in that category right now. So let's go to the upper scale, and that is at the end of the first column and the top of the second column. Let's write next to that 983 and put a parentheses next to that 236 parentheses. And that 236 is the Westin in town center. And that's how many rooms of 983 minus that 236 of those of the upper scale, the upper upscale that we have at the beach. Now the next category, upscale. Write the number next to upscale, 1593. 1593 next to upscale. And then I want you to follow that upscale down to the second from the bottom on that second column and circle the Hyatt House. And so what I've done for you is I've given you, and I see Mr. Jones is quickly to the calculator, as we would expect him to be, to provide the percentages associated with these two categories so that you have an idea. And so I give you that as kind of some homework as we get into talking about how we're going to give you a recommendation today. So if you go to your city council policy and you open it up and you go to the third page and we get to the prerequisites paragraph and you highlight 4.3 on the third page because it's back. Everybody got 4.3 and they circle that prerequisites there and you see that there are 3 categories associated with that. And so with that as our guideline for management to enforce policy, to follow through on council's directives, I provide to you the following assessment. Do we have a tourism marketing plan? And in our opinion, the RACEAP satisfies this requirement. It has a lot of discussion that you have heard Doug mention, because the issue at hand is it really discusses redevelopment. It also entails new big tourism-oriented projects of an arena or a dome or of a headquarters hotel magnitude. But it specifically states it is there that we are focused on the redevelopment of our tourism industry. So I give that a green check because that's what the marketing plan that this application came in. Has the tourism adopted, or correction, has the council adopted a tourism zone? And we know that to be true, and we've had discussions about whether or not to expand those tourism zones in our city. And finally, has the finance director verified that the developer has a shortfall in project funding? And we believe that she has done an adequate job in verifying with the financial institutions associated with this project. So council, many of you are trying to understand what is gap financing. And so here's the Dave Hansen version. I am a developer and I want to build a hotel. I want to build a project of this magnitude, of this scope, of this quality. And so I go to the banks and say, I want to build this project. And the banks provide me this amount of financing. And even on a good day, the very best in our business probably don't get financing that exceeds 65% of the project cost. Maybe there's 1 or 2 out there that have the draw to push 70, but for the sake of this, the upper tier of those in the business can pull 65% financing. That means that the remainder, 35%, has to be made up by equity. Equity is cash, liquid assets that owners have to deliver to the project. Most of these projects are of a size and magnitude and cost that pulling 35% equity is very difficult to do. So when they shrink that to say, look, maybe I can pull 25% equity to pay for this project, and I'm in at 65% financing, and the bank's going to demand a high level of equity for you to get into this project, then the remaining 10% in this exercise is called gap financing. And they have to figure out some way to make up that gap, or they do one of 2 things to their project. Well, they have 3 choices. Number 1, they can shrink the quality of their project to consume that 10%. They can reduce scope of their project and reduce that 10%. Or in some developers' cases, they will not sacrifice scope or quality, and they will walk away from the project without that gap financing. And the reason why this incentive program was created is so that developers and private investment can reach for higher quality and a greater scope to deliver a better product. And so that is why this gap financing exists. So I wanted to share that with you because everybody, both from the Hotel Association, from my finance department, and other folks that I've talked to, Took a while for Dave to grab that. I'm sure it's taken a while for those that are listening in to figure out how those projects are developed. So if you go to paragraph 5.2, we have specified in our policy some very specific evaluation criteria. You heard Doug say it's significantly more than 30 million. They get a green check. On the chart that we put in there with regards to the comparison of what we took out or what the developer took out and assembled for properties versus what his expected sales certainly exceeds $1 million. And we know that it will provide year-round employment. Now we get to the tourism void. And the tourism void has, you can't give it a green, but you can't give it a red X. Because the discussion at hand is, it's multifold. First of all, what is the flag that's being brought to the beach? Some will say, we ought to look on our STR and we should only be financing upscale. And some would say, you know what? We ought to also include upscale. Because our policy, our race app says, we're in the redevelopment business. And the lion's share of quality products that are being brought on the market meet those two levels. And this provides an opportunity to reach that quality, to create that gap financing capability for a loan, another loan institution, to provide them that additional funding. Additionally, we talked about parking and how important public parking is at the beach. Our evaluation there is that in phase one of the Hyatt project, the 448 parking slots that they have in there will provide over 150 spaces for public parking. But at the same time, we know they have a phase two. And the consideration is, if they build the phase two tower, that parking won't be available. So they have to reconcile that in the discussion of their application of how they preserve that public parking if they want that check to remain green in parking. And parking is only a component of this category called tourism void. Thirdly, the race app. The race app, in our mind, the city staff's mind, literally read and quite figuratively evaluated is we want to redevelop the quality of the beach product because the average daily rate is brought up by that, and so is the client that is visiting the beach. They are spending more money here. We've seen those graphs year in and year out, and we have no indication that that's going to change. So those are the three categories that make it a yellow question mark. It's in a tourism zone. And then now back to the other issue that Doug brought up, gap financing. I gave you the question, I gave you the analysis. Bank financing, equity, and the gap. There's been a huge question that has been raised about equity and what percentage of equity is in this project. And we have validated through our finance director and her conversations with the banks and looking at the understanding of who the partners are in this, that there's $23.5 million in equity in this project. Second issue that has popped up is, and it's one that you on the council, as has many of the industry asked, how can you come forth with an application once you're out of the ground? And that is a dilemma that takes that category from green check to a yellow amber. But then with the letters that we receive from the VTC, you get a letter in February from them that says the fact that they're under construction is not material to their ability to submit an application. And so that's why you don't have a red X in that category, because our policy doesn't address it, and it looks like the state doesn't care with regards to its applicability to the policy. So what happens if you don't get the gap financing? I go back to my original analysis. There's the bank, there's the equity. You can only stretch it so far and only bring so many partners of equity or you can't make a profit. They have to take that gap and they've got to shrink the quality, which they can't do because they're out of the ground, and Crestview and Hyatt, they've signed their deals. That quality's in there. They can only eliminate scope. And so the possibility of not having the parking, the structured parking associated with this project is very real if they don't get the gap financing. And then finally, does it require an exorbitant amount of city investment? And I can tell you there's no city investment dollars in this project. Continuing on with the assessment, and if you're following along in your city policy, you can see that paragraph 5.4 specifies the process that we use. We come before the city council, we provide the staff analysis based on the project's merits and the application associated with it, which we did in January, and based upon the council's preliminary support, we moved it on to the Development Authority. As Doug mentioned, the Development Authority's reaction was not as we anticipated, and so they came back with a deferral. The mayor followed up with a 60-day, and let me give you the scores because I'm losing my track. The Development Authority requested that deferral, which means in accordance with the policy, they have not taken an official position of preliminary support or the opposite, which would be to that, preliminary denial or final denial in this case. So the mayor's moratorium has now expired, and as such, we, the city staff, are in abeyance to move forward with the creation of a performance agreement because the staff and the developer cannot move to that stage without both the city council's preliminary support and the Development Authority's preliminary support. So what are my recommendations? I have three. The first is in regards to this specific project. Because this project merits consideration, we are requesting that the council refer it back to this project back to the Development Authority to conclude its assessment and determination of preliminary support. And I put a slash in denial because that's our policy doesn't say denial, it just says preliminary support in accordance with the existing policy. My second recommendation is in regards to our tourism marketing plan. And I would state that we need to appoint a committee to relook the race app because of the discussion that's going on with regards to this project. We need to reevaluate the deficiencies that are in that, especially in regards to projects that qualify for the Tourism Development Financing Program. Because right now, it reads, we want to work on redevelopment. We want to take parcels that only deliver on that chart that we had in there that said, you got this many rooms, and this is the quantity of your sales, and this is what your real estate tax is, and this is what the revenues are to the city. But at the same time, you're evaluating what is the product to the clients that we are attracting to the beach, as opposed to redevelopment that brings you this level of sales, this level of taxes, and this quality of client that's coming to our beach. Versus only allowing this program to be used for new and large tourism products. We need 2 liaisons. We need to have the stakeholders that are here today and that have been present during this 60-day moratorium and the discussion at the table, and we, the staff, will support that. And finally, with regards to our policy, based on what the race app says, we need to look at our policy, and we need to have a decision on out-of-the-ground, after-the-fact applications. Irregardless of what the state has said in their February letter, we need to establish the policy in the discussion. Secondly, we need to consider having an independent reviewer who looks at the construction costs, because the construction costs have been an issue in this discussion with regards to this particular project, as well as the loan documents And we need to do that before we make that first payment, because that kind of establishes the percentage that we are looking at with regards to the payments, validating those percentages. We also need to modify that evaluation criteria. And as I've discussed and as Doug presented, we're talking about quality. We're talking about the flag, and we're talking about the STR rating and where we want this to fall in and where we want to incentivize folks to reach for that quality that we can achieve here in Virginia Beach. We need to talk about parking. We need to talk about equity. And we need to talk about level of sales. 1 million don't cut it. Finally, we need to modify the briefing process. Currently, as your policy states, the Development Authority in paragraph 5.8 has the final disposition of the agreement. And I don't think that's the way you envisioned it to go. I think that what we should be doing is we provide a closed session briefing to the council to garner preliminary support. With that support, it's referred to the Development Authority for a closed session briefing. During the month between their Development Authority closed session briefing and the open hearing at the Development Authority and a vote, we, the staff, take it to VTC and VRA for preliminary review and kind of a thumbs up or down, because this is a very elongated project that involves a lot of decisions. And if you have not everybody on board and you get a no decision, it's like, why did you waste my time? And I know you would be upset with that. So now you come back from the VRA the next month to the Development Authority for an open hearing, a final decision of preliminary support. Then back to the, with that in hand, the development agreement is produced. And as it says in the second bullet there, the Development Authority agrees to that development agreement, and then it comes back to the City Council for final approval of the development agreement before it goes to the Comptroller of the State for final approval. So subject to your questions, Doug and I are available along with the staff to answer any of those.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Questions or comments, please, Mr. Boss.
One, first I appreciate Doug putting up with all my phone calls and discussions on this, because he's been very helpful, so I think they did a good job. But what caused me to cause this, and when council as a whole did the moratorium, was that I looked at the Cavalier deal that we did. I didn't vote for it, but I agree wholeheartedly with people down there that subsidies are bad. So let me just start with that premise. They are bad in all circumstances. But we have a state law, and as long as we have the state law and we had a program in place, I thought it was appropriate that any applicant get the same consideration as any other applicant under the rules that were in effect when they started working on their project. I thought that was only fair. How the evaluation goes is another story, but they deserve to be considered. So I think they've done that, and I appreciate all the hard work that's done that. I did have a couple questions. In that process, I still think this project, wherever it goes, would still require that letter from the comptroller. Is that correct?
Ultimately, that's the final certification.
Okay, I know we had a lot of letters from different parties, but as I understood back to state law, the letter from the comptroller of the Commonwealth is still a prerequisite requirement. I'm on board with that. And the other part is going back to you as you were walking through, Mr. Hanson, on the process. So if the Development Authority still remains the final say, because if they say no, then there isn't something for us to look at, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's also in the state law, if I remember correct. Is that how that works, or is that us?
No.
John, would you say that again? I'm sorry.
I said, you talked about the process. If the Development Authority says, when they do that final look, and they say no, there's nothing to come to us. 'Cause
They always get a chop, and I defer to the finance
They
attorney.
have to be the ones that get the money from, if you will, the public body to the financial institution.
They have to accept it, don't they?
Right.
They have to
That's
agree
my
to that role.
Right, yeah.
And secondarily about the comptroller won't even look at it until all of the local actions are complete.
Well, I understood that. I was just trying to make sure when people saw all those letters, they're good letters to get, to clarify things, but they don't have a legal effect relative to the eligibility of a project for funding, and that was the point I was trying to make sure that everybody understood. And that in fact, the development does disperse the funds, so in fact, they are the last really sayer. So if they say no, there isn't something to be further looked at unless they change their opinion. I just want to make sure that
They-
people in that process. knew that.
Councilman Moss, they get 2 bites at the apple.
Right.
They get the preliminary support, which then catapults the staff and the developer into the agreement discussion, drafting. My recommendation is to get the order of march changed. They still get that approval, and then back to the council as the final local approving authority. It's just, I don't think it addresses the order of march, and I think.
I'd say they're
Yes,
the
sir.
necessary condition, but without our agreement to rebate the taxes, nothing happens. But they are the necessary, we are the sufficient.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just to make sure everybody understood how that process works, 'cause I think that really is important. And also, I hope when we go back and look to improve these categories, when someone says like prohibitively expensive, I don't know what that means either, that's kind of nebulous, so I think all the thresholds need to be looked at. And one of the things that I went back and when I was looking through some academic and different business case analysis, that most people are looking at investment per room, and I know when you got this mixed use, that's a little bit more difficult to understand what part of the cost is attributed to the mixed use, the retail. But most people building hotels look at take all the cost of the hotel and apply it to a by room basis, and then look at what banks look at, talk to a few bankers, they look at what that revenue is per room, and that gets them back to the qualifying loans. So I hope whenever we have these and there are mixed use and those cost analysis, I think it would be important to be able to break out those pieces. I think probably that's what analysis would do, so you would understand what was happening with the room relative to what was happening with the other piece. But the other part that still bothers me the most, and all subsidies, is this competitive advantage. I know when we did the Cavalier project, we looked at displacement analysis. I noticed we didn't have any kind of displacement analysis of other projects. I think that's something that maybe isn't the controlling piece, but it is a piece of information that we asked. And then, because basically, once you do this, every project that falls in one of these categories, you have basically said, we are now in the banking business for hotels. I mean, I don't think we should be, and that's certainly not what I want to be in. I just think we not have this policy, but I think if we're going to be doing something, you are really setting that everyone will be getting an indirect loan from the city in effect through their own revenues, and I think we ought to just acknowledge that. Now, the difficult piece, because a lot of people have done stuff at the oceanfront on their own dime, some of us we all know very well, a number of hotels, and now they are in fact competing. You can't retroactively fix that I know of, but I think our policy has to recognize the scale that has to happen going forward. Can't be prejudicial to people in the pipeline, I don't think, because I think we're changing the rules. But those are things I think that would concern me, and I think would concern others as well. So I look forward to. I don't have the time to be on this liaison committee if it's during the day, but if it's not, I'd be happy to serve. But if it's during the day, I have limited ability, but I certainly would look at stuff. But I think there is, if we're gonna have a state law, there is merit here, but I think we have to understand that we're getting into the banking business. And I'd recommend, Mr. Mayor, that in our legislative package, we ask them to abolish the law, but I'm sure that won't pass. But because I don't think this is business we should be in. But if we are, let's be smarter about it, and I think that your recommendations are good ones, and I really can't, I think you've done a thorough job on it, and I appreciate, Doug, all the time you spent with me to make me understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Okay.
On the evaluation
I
process,
got you, Barbara. I got John first.
I think we probably should have a third blip in there in which we have access to and review the structure of the entity that is doing the project. For instance, is it a partnership? And what's the partnership agreement? Or is it an LLC? And how is that structured? And my concern is that there's not a situation where one particular part of, say, a partnership has preferred benefits over another to the extent that they basically are another lender into the project.
But you know, that fits kind of like what John was just saying. If we're going to be the bank, we all know every daggone thing.
Correct.
You know, and I think that's what you're saying. Am I not right?
That's what I'm saying.
And I think, great point. Barbara, then John.
I'll let John go first.
Okay, John.
because
Well, go
I'm
ahead.
not
I'll defer to you. Go right ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say, I'm pretty simplistic at this whole thing, so I thought it was a very good presentation, and it really sort of did a one-on-one of gap financing, and I appreciate that. And my thought is, like I say, very simplistic. Somehow or other, we've got to get all of the politics out of this. And it's got to be extremely objective. You either are or you aren't, and it's not left up to whoever is judging it. And these words like what is a void, somehow or other we've got to identify it very plainly, because a void to one person may not be a void to somebody else, and I think that's where we are. And that one about whether or not it's requiring a prohibitive amount of city investment, that's prohibitive, that's by whose standard? In my opinion, that one ought to read, no other city investment other than gap financing is what you're applying for. Because I think these that come in with a whole pile of city investments, that loses me real fast. So somehow or other, I think we have to get this very objective and, as you said, know everything and take all of the politics out of it, if that's possible. Not possible, but as close as we can.
John?
Well, I agree with Barbara, and I think this has really shown a light on it for the sheer fact that this is the very first project that's been considered for this program that was not council initiated. So, I mean, we've looked at other programs, the Dome site, potential headquarters hotel, the Cavalier, as well as the arena, and all of those actually came out of our retreats, and we said that these are important initiatives for the city, and that this would be an appropriate program for that. So, shame on me for not anticipating what would happen when the private sector came up with a project that had not been discussed at the council level and said, we think that this would be an appropriate project. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the specifics in terms of the recommendation, particularly number 2 as it pertains to the RACEAP plan. And I was the council member that had asked for us to go through that master planning process and was intimately involved in that. And I will tell you that at no time during the development of that plan or subsequent to that did we ever, this other program was not available at the time. It did not anticipate that would answer those questions. And I would submit to this council and to staff that the RACEAP plan's not the appropriate marketing plan for this program. I know that we've spent a lot of time here today talking about that plan referring to redevelopment. Well, that's not because it's a redevelopment plan, it's just because that area's already developed. So any changes that are going to happen in terms of the buildings there is going to be redevelopment by its very nature. So the plan never really talked about taking out blighted areas or redevelopment or those types of things. All the references that are in there, at least to the best of my knowledge, are just a function of the fact that we've already got a developed area that, if it's going to change, is going to be redevelopment. So I don't think that that necessarily is the right program. I think that when we take a look at this, we probably need to have a marketing plan that is very specific, as Barbara said, so that everybody knows what the rules are, but that is specific to this particular program. And addresses what it is that I thought we were doing when we approved this, which was to encourage unique tourism offerings and ones that the community has identified as being important to the growth of tourism in our particular market. And we also probably need to talk about definitions too. I mean, there's been much made about public parking, and I think that we need to define that, because certainly because someone builds parking in the resort that is going to be made available for retail sales to the public, that, in my view, is not part of our public parking system. I mean, that is available and can be taken away from, revenue generation or just the general public going based on what's happening at that particular development at the time. And so, I at least for me, I see a big difference between what is public parking and what is parking that is being developed that is greater than what the minimum requirements are for the zoning. I think that staff's done a good job in terms of their recommendation for the next steps. Certainly, when and if it comes back to us, my analysis is going to be based on what it is that I thought that we were approving when we accepted this program, and that is for the void. I mean, that's really what it is that I'm looking at in terms of it making a unique tourism offering. And I will tell you, one of the things that really kind of upsets me to some degree is that, and we had it on here, and Dave, you mentioned it, and that is that the RACEP plan, if you take a look at it, really the basic tenet of that was to enhance visual and pedestrian access to the oceanfront and to maintain those view sheds that we have that are in between the buildings that exist today. This council was kind enough to approve an ordinance that I asked for that was based on this very development, where staff had been recommending to use those Stud Street parks to actually load and unload the second phase of this project, and we won't have that happen anymore without it coming to this council. But I mean, those are the basic tenets of the plan, not redevelopment. And I never had anticipated that this program was going to be a redevelopment program. And I think the one thing I can say with great confidence today is that, we owe the development community a lot more work in terms of identifying what the rules are and what it is that we really mean to accomplish by this plan.
Yes, sir.
I couldn't disagree with anything you said there, maybe about some of that parking pieces. But I do think that this project, such as it is, when they get it at the Development Authority, should be judged by the rules that are in place and were in place and were the standards in place, not prospectively applying what we think we might do in the future back to it, because I just don't think that's how processes should work. Now, it may not merit, none of us may change how we support it, but I do think that's the standard that should be applied when it's assessed.
Well, the standard was and is and probably should continue to be that, it doesn't satisfy a void in the marketplace, so.
Rose,
just
did you
wanna
have something? Okay, Rosemary, I'm
I
sorry.
just want to say something about the Development Authority, that we have a lot of very brilliant people that we have taken great effort to choose who sits at that table. And I think it's really important that there's some power horses there that we really need to connect some of our energy to their energy to look at their business acumen. And probably we haven't used them to the best of their abilities. We use the Planning Commission to give us advice, and often we make the decision that we think's important, and then we send it to them to really rubber stamp it. So I think that this is a good opportunity to utilize a lot of that brain power that we've asked to come and serve our city. And so I think it's a really good step. So Dave, in your recommendations of the 3 bullet points, is there an order that you're suggesting of those?
Well, I think because the application's on the table, because we have a policy in effect, and because we have done.
Here's what I found on the web for.
Thank you,
What does
Dave.
Surrey say after that?
Quite welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, Dave.
What's that phone plan?
Thank you, Siri. Thank you, Siri.
Bound for what?
We should have just asked her. We could have avoided all this.
Why didn't we ask Siri?
So in order of march, it's number 1, it's number 2, and it's number 3. What's not on there is what do we do with what's coming over the bow, waiting out on the street to come over the bow with projects that are in the wings. We need to deal with this one. We need to refer it back to the Development Authority and have them spend the time and energy. We will go forth this week. They have their next meeting.
That's fine, but you just hit on something, what's coming over the bow. And a message I put out as quickly as I could is, if you look where the flaw, I think, that the biggest flaw we've got to deal with in the evaluation of this current, and everyone at this table wants to be fair and do the right thing. Everyone wants to see our oceanfront continue to progress and, bring newer and nicer projects and bring more people and bring more money. But don't go out of the ground until You've gone through the process. This is going to be a very difficult, we could be having some very healthy, honest discussions. It's not fair to the city, it's not fair to the applicant, frankly, with the current situation that this thing is in. And I would just make sure that somehow it's broadcast, don't go out of the ground until you have your total financing package in place, especially your gap financing if you're looking for it and if it's available. Because I believe as we sit back and move forward, this is the biggest hurdle that we've got to overcome if we can overcome. I'm not saying we can't overcome it, but I am sitting here saying to you, the discussions would be a bit at a different level, and different questions would be being discussed if the building wasn't already out of the ground.
Well,
Yes, sir, Jim?
where does this
Oh,
responsibility lie?
sorry.
I'm sorry, ma'am?
Where does their responsibility lie about it being out of the ground?
That's my question too. I mean, these are smart business people who are obviously, building this, and they're not gonna do something and knowing that they are falling $10 or $20 million short if they weren't given some type of signal that this was gonna be okay. So I'm unclear too. Where does this lie and how did it get here?
And Mayor, so my question actually dovetails into that, so right before Doug gets up to take the slings. Who makes the application to VTC? And walk me through, in the same vein, how do we get from no, maybe, yes, whatever, in these things? Because that just doesn't make sense.
All right, so let me take that one first. And if you remember back on sort of that slide about the roles, the role of VTC, and this is part of what, Candy, we had to understand and why we went up there, is how did we get these letters like this? Their role, it's our decision, your decision, the Development Authority's decision as to whether or not there's a void. What they will say to you is their role is to help us put forward the best application to the comptroller that we can. And so what they would say to you is those letters really addressed whether or not we had answered the question and the developer had answered the question in the information that we had provided at that point.
But
So that's,
if I can, so going back to what John said about the importance of the comptroller,
Yeah.
you're saying that the VTC's mission in this case is to bring forward an application that will be acceptable to the comptroller? Do they have veto ability, or, I mean, what is their role in all this?
yeah, they don't have, my understanding is they do not have, and I keep kind of glancing at Dana, they don't have veto ability. And it's one of these things where we're putting 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack today. We had a chart, one of the charts we cut out that I think was in your original chart Friday, is their process and sort of the steps. And if you look sort of we're in step 1.5 in their process. But if you kind of look through, it's this preliminary conversation. Look at Dana jumping. I can always tell when I go off track, Dana jumps up.
The one thing that's affirmatively on the VTC is whether we have a compliant marketing plan. And from the earliest conversations of this program, they said that the RACE app met that requirement. So as far as the sort of breaker that VTC has, it is at that step.
They're doing the scorecard, and then it goes to VRA to validate the gap financing. And in answer to Ms. Ross Hammond and Ms. Kane's questions, you get into this question about what's the gap? Well, that's how much this developer's borrowing capacity is. Everything else to get to the quality and all the scope of his product is equity. They look down in their checkbook and they look across their partners and they say, we can only generate this amount of equity, but we still want to build the project. They got those 3 choices I gave you. They drop quality, they remove scope, or they walk away from the project. And so that's kind of, how do they get out of the ground? Without putting them on the podium and asking them the question point blank, the question in my mind is they're stretched on equity, or they got to reduce scope, or they got to reduce quality, or they walk away, or they.
But going back,
Because they can't walk away from the project, they're out of the ground. So they're down to those 2 out of the 3 options they got for the project.
yeah, but I kind of want to go back to the basic question. So with respect to VTC, how did these letters come about? Who requested them? And was it the same entity that requested it all 3 times? Or was it one entity requested it one time, another, and that's why we have 3 different answers?
So we got on the phone with the VTC folks in, I don't even know, Patty, July or so, June or July. We knew this was coming forward and said, here's what we've got, here's what's coming, here's the dynamics of this project. They said, well, start sending us information and providing us some data so we can start to help you understand the question and start to answer that void question. So that's what we did. We were not anticipating the letter. We didn't expect the letter. I think it was sent with all good intent, but we never requested a letter and never requested follow-up letters, is all I can tell you. So they sent, I think it was in the correspondence between, Vert Confroy and Ron Berkebile. So it was a little less formal than I think than it felt once we got that letter.
So you're saying that all 3 of these letters were not requested by anyone?
Not requested by the city. I mean, that's all I can say. That's all I can tell you. Yeah, not requested by us, yeah.
So we don't know who actually requested the letters?
Correct.
All right, other questions or comments? We got to move on. Amelia?
Just one more. If you look back on what you gave us earlier, we went through where we were supporting some of this, right? In the preliminary?
Correct. So we brought,
We were supporting. Remember when you all came, and then suddenly things were turned around.
We're just gonna
So
go
that
with
whole part
recommendations.
about the development authority
Okay.
having the last word, I'm thinking we should have the last word as the council.
and I think Mr. Hanson's is agreeing with
The
that.
recommendation is.
The process is, you get first bite at the apple after the staff works at it. You refer it to the Development Authority, and they kind of get in line with you, agree with you, or they deny it. They have that power to deny it, which means you have to have their signature on the agreement. Therefore, if they deny it preliminarily, it does not move forward. If both the council and the Development Authority agree, the staff and the developer go to work on the agreement. And then the current policy says that agreement comes back to the council for approval, then to the Development Authority for approval, and then off to the comptroller for final approval.
If I can add just one thing here, I think it's
Mark,
obvious,
my
but,
pleasure to hear your comment.
thank you, Mayor. We can by policy determine the order in which the various entities play their roles. But at the end of the day, the takeaway point is both this body and the Development Authority have to say yes. If either one were to say no, a project does not get this benefit. And to add to that, the state also has to say yes. So you can change the order, but it's got to be 3 yeses in order for the project to participate in the program.
So it's not like planning where if they don't like their answer, they can have an appeal and come back to council.
That's correct.
Barbara?
Somewhere way back, I think I was the one who asked for that compilation of all of these things that we allow as incentives, and I thought that was a very good piece of work that you laid all that.
It was good.
I really think that we shouldn't be doing things in an isolated fashion. You know, like we're only looking at this. We really need to kind of be keeping in mind all of these particular programs in there. Just my own personal opinion is this one is a lot less painful than some others that we have, one of the 3 entities is not that much. I mean, but anyway, they're really, somewhere in this policy, I really think we ought to address just how much a development is eligible for. I mean, can you get 6 different incentive programs, or are you only eligible for 1, or something? Somehow or other, we really need to keep it all in perspective.
And we are bringing back, our task is to bring back all of these, and one of the things we're doing, for example, is looking at we've got started a list of what have you funded under different programs, what's hanging out there, so we're going there. Just an editorial comment, in terms of, if this hasn't been painful, then I don't want to work on the next one.
I meant the amount of money from the city. I meant the amount of money from the city and the way it's funded.
I couldn't pass it up.
It's no direct money,
I did ask Doug to include in that report, what are the tax expenditures that we have cumulatively and annually are rolling over for all those. And I think that's gonna be an eye-opener when we see
The
just
direct.
what that is.
The direct, to me, is what's more painful.
All right, any other questions or comments? Everyone's appreciative of the work the staff's done, and we're following the recommendation of the city manager. Correct? All right, very good. So we'll move on. 2016, 2017 Resource Management Plan, Quality Fiscal Environment. Dave?
Yes, sir. We continue with our operating budget, departmental briefings, and first up is Barry Frankenfield and Planning.
Barry,
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
glad to have you.
Make it seem really simple after what you just went through. So, good afternoon. Thank you for having us. There's lots of changes going on in the plan department. We have most of the A-team here today: Brian Solis, Karen Leslie, Gerald Phillips, the little Saunders, and Clay Burnick. And this is Karen Leslie's last budget meeting. So, any difficult questions, go to her. So there's lots of changes going on. In here, we have a budget presentation that anticipated a complete merger of resort office and parking with planning, and since then, that has been revised. So I will report out the resort office and special events, because you won't hear it anyplace else, within mind that it will be more than likely be in the Convention and Visitor Bureau as the final. So this is my pitch, is that I think that the ability that you have as a council to regulate land use law is probably one of the greatest powers and the most influences you have to create a safe and sustainable city. In addition, you appoint or support through various legislation 4 boards and commissions and 2 other boards and commissions, and those are the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Chesapeake Bay Board, the Wetlands Board, the Historic Review Board, and the Historic Preservation Commission. You appoint all those, and the Planning Department manages all those groups. Turn the page. See, we got this. Okay, so Brian and I've been together a long time, but we can't read our minds yet. So the department structure, just an oversimplification. Oh, I did it? Oh, he doesn't have it. Okay. See, that's why I can't do it. It's just a simple, there's 128 proposed in the department. There's actually 135.5 shown in your budget proposal, and that's because the special events is still shown in there. But what we propose is comprehensive planning, current planning, development services, environment and sustainability office, planning services, permits, inspections, and the SGA office and the parking division all become part of the planning department. Just a little bit of what we do is, believe it or not, we issue over 35,000 building permits a year and 96,000 inspections. Over 2,900 plans are submitted to the Development Services Center. We have 3,000 people visit our reception counters. And I said, how do you know that? And they said, we actually count. So we do know. We do the zoning for, we have over 40,000 inspections and issues more than 1,500 permits. And those are the things you love, the signs, the sheds in the wrong place, those kind of things. Planning Commission heard 320 applications. And last year, we had an increase in the amount of parking vehicles parked, and we actually had a decrease in the amount of tickets. So how are we going to improve business? You had, as part of your package this weekend, you had a memo report from the city manager and Doug Smith, which identified some of the process and resource improvements that we're working on. It was a long list, but I'm here to assure you that our goal is to make the planning department the most efficient, the most receptive group that you have to deal with for development. And with that in mind, we've had, as part of our recommendations, we did an assessment, we did an audit, and one of the big things out of that is we have audited every position in the department. That means every position, every inspector, every assistant, every planning tech. That position has been audited, has been identified, has been referred back to Human Resources, and they are going to give us a report. They've promised me they're going to help us out, and by the end of the month, and give us a report on specific recommendations related to what they are seeing happening with staff, who's working on what, where the resources are being spent, so that we can balance those resources better to make a more efficient response. In addition, we're working with human resources, and even public utilities is working with not even, but also public utilities, that we are working on an extensive customer training, customer service training program that we expect to implement throughout at least that entire building, first, second, and third floor. So we're working on all that together at one time. All right, so here's the numbers. Basically, the budget items and the numbers, basically it shows the increases over the previous year. The increases are in black, the red are decreases. And basically, the Planning Services Director's Office, that increase is primarily due to some items we're going to show you. Those are improvements to the first floor infrastructure, as well as a study for the ITA and transition area plan area. The ESO board has increased a little bit. That's primarily due to salaries. Comprehensive planning, we moved some people around between comprehensive planning, current planning, and SGA. So where you see the red numbers, primarily that's because people got moved around, positions were moved. And where you see the black numbers, strategic growth area, that means some people were moved into that office. So we want to share resources better and provide a better service, and so we hopefully be able to do that. In the special events, that number primarily increases due to the projected revenue related to the tourism investment program. And the parking, that number goes down primarily because of staff getting moved from the parking division over into the special events division. That shows 135, but as we propose, it would be 128.5, because 7 people would be going to Convention Visitor Bureau. Okay, so where does the money come from and where does it go? Obviously, if we start at the right, going down the red is the general fund, which is about 21%. Green is planning services. Those are fees related to the department, building permits, plan review, plat review, those kind of things. Parking enterprise fund, $5.2 million, all generated by parking revenue. Tourism investment fund, again, this one will come out of this department in the final, but that is the funding that goes for the special events office, as well as all the special events at the ocean front. Water and sewer fund transfer, that covers 3 staff. They're in Development Services Center that are funded to review public water, public utility services, and they are housed in the DSC, but they are paid for by the Department of Public Utilities. And then finally, mass transit and trolley operations, that's $7.1 million. I'm going to go into a little bit about that. Has increased slightly, but that is all the HRT services. They have traditionally been in the transportation division. So where do the expenses go? Obviously, a big portion, $10 million, almost $11 million is for staff. The $15 million for operations includes all operational expenses related to the planning divisions, as well as special events and parking. And transportation, transit. That's why that number is so big. The yellow and the red are related to transfers and debt service related to the enterprise fund. Parking enterprise fund is where those numbers come from. All right, so what are we doing? What are some of our significant activities? I've talked about the SGA office and the parking division will go into the planning department. We think this is a fantastic way to consolidate staff, the transportation division, regulatory permitting, all into one department. We hope to provide a tremendous and much better service in zoning and in land use and in implementation of SGAs by having all those resources able to be involved in one department. We also, one of the biggest items is $375,000 in this proposed budget for an interfacility traffic area master plan. The first shock probably is how come $375,000? That's a lot of money. Of course it is. It's a budgetary estimate at this point, which will be adjusted based on the final scope and fee, which we are working with the Planning Commission, the ITA committee, staff, to determine what that scope is. This covers about approximately 1,600 acres of property that has been assembled by the city. It has the potential to be bigger, better, greater, more exciting than the Lake Ridge deal, and that was a pretty exciting deal. So, and it identified a portion of that is, a major portion of that is city property. So how we deal with stormwater, how we deal with roads, how we deal with design, and how we deal with specific projects, we expect to use this study, this effort, to get into a lot of detail to really plan the future for that area. So that's why that number's what it is. If it's less than that, we will certainly reflect that and not spend that much money. One of my biggest concerns was the appearance of the first floor of the planning department. The locked doors, the doors that seem to lead you into mazes, the signs that don't tell you where to go, not knowing where the elevator is. It's the entrance to all three major departments: planning, public works, and public utilities. So we have hired an architect. We have identified improvements to customer service desk, reception area, information kiosks, overall wayfinding, how you get in. I spent a lot of time standing in the hall greeting people, so I have my next career all set up for me. But explain to people where to go, how to get in and out of the, where the elevator is, where the other departments are. I mean, it's not the most professional experience. So that's $350,000. That is going to pay for a first phase. We are finalizing those plans, and we hope to make those things happen, at least in the entrance in next fall. It does not include upgrades to the restrooms or workstations, which still are items I have on my personal list. What are some other significant issues? HRT, mass transit. That cost is about $800,000 higher than the previous years. That covers an increase in service hours. It also covers a commitment citywide, region-wide, to an improvement in the rolling stock in the buses, the capital improvements related to that stock. We anticipate modest increase in revenues. Our revenues have slowly increased over the years based on the plan submittals, the reviews required, and I believe the Acela program and the ability to be more efficient obviously will make that even do better. One of the issues in the future is we have identified, and trust me, we're not the first ones to identify it. Our codes were developed for greenfield development, for suburban development. We are in the middle of infill development. We are in the middle of tough projects. They're in between a lot of other things, have difficult stormwater. So we are working with Tidewater Builder Associations and other groups to try to work through a process to improve the code. So that's one of the issues that is on our radar for the next couple of years. So looking ahead, being redundant here, but we are with the SGA parking merger, we think has a tremendous benefit citywide. I hope you agree, and I hope you get, in addition to some of the negative comments, I hope you're getting good comments about the service and the response that the planning department has provided with people. And we see our future effort is to ensure the development is safe and attractive and assures consistency with your goals and initiatives. So we appreciate your support and with all the boards and commissions, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Yes, Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Barry. Thank you very much and your staff for stellar work that you do. And let's face it, you inherited some problems when you came into the business. And our process improvement team not too long ago did a white paper analysis where we made some recommendations that will hopefully be helpful. And then there was also an audit done. And regretfully, we still get a lot of concerns from the development community about the lack of expediency with getting plans approved. And also still a plethora of complaints from the permits and inspection folks. In other words, there is a perception out there that they're functioning more as adversaries than advocates. And I think that's identified what you said about the customer service training and things of that nature. And, I understand that you had a lot of staff turnover and experience left, and, we're certainly losing a valuable member of our family. But the point is, what do you need from us to do your job better? Because what happens is when it takes a while for plans to get going, businesses to get open, we're losing tax revenue, where people aren't being employed.
when people have to wait all day for a permits person to come to inspect their air conditioning unit, or, just a onward drip, okay, fix this, okay, now that you fix this, fix that. And, months of delays getting businesses open, and sometimes the city gets in the way. And one of the recommendations we made were something along the line that I had a conversation with recently with the city manager about an ombudsman system, where somebody can come into the process and actually have an advocate that would guide them through a very difficult maze of process that you have to go through, or even using some outside consultants. There's a number of things we can do to hopefully make your job better. And I appreciate the magnitude of the job that you have. It's important because, once again, we have Bob Scott on our process team, and he constantly reminds us that you have a duty to make sure that all, the codes are in line for public safety and things like that. But I think there has to be some latitude that, we have to be more customer friendly, get things done quicker, as efficiently, but also, once again, become ambassadors, not adversaries, and help people out with the process. What could we do to help you?
That's like a softball. You want me to really take that one?
I really would. Yeah.
All right, so the ombudsman or concierge approach is definitely something that we've looked into and we would like to consider. We did not come forward with asking for any additional staff. So if an ombudsman or concierge approach, we've researched other cities. We think that would be an appropriate use. I do not believe we need additional staff in the DSC, but when you bring up mechanical inspections, we have 2 mechanical inspectors. Some days, a mechanical inspector does 40 inspections. So I think they're doing pretty well getting to that site in the same day. But if there's any other area, it would be the inspectors. Other than that, I think we have plenty of staff and your support. We have TBA working with us. I believe they've been very supportive to work with us on process improvement. So it is going to take us some time. So, we would appreciate your patience. But I believe as far as immediate support, an ombudsman or concierge approach, as well as inspectors for mechanical inspections would be 2 immediate needs that we have.
Jim?
I don't disagree with that approach, but what I would tell you is we don't want to be one of the localities like Northern Virginia where you're basically required to hire an expediter in order to get anything done. And I can tell you, that exists in Northern Virginia to this day in several different localities up there. So that's a concern. I'm very pleased to see your idea of making the first floor of Building 2 more user-friendly, because unless you go in there all the time, you have absolutely no idea where you're supposed to go for your zoning or permits or dropping off plans for DSC or that sort of thing. And then, God forbid, if you have to go to public utilities for DFUs, I mean, it's amazing. It's very difficult to somebody that's not used to it, and you've got doors that don't go anywhere, and it's very difficult. So I'm glad to see you doing that. I worry that you don't have enough program for that, frankly. Not saying you should up your budget, but you're not going to be able to do so much in that building with what you've got there. And I assume that's construction only. You've already got the design done.
Close. We have the design is paid for. Yes.
Okay. So
the design's not done, but the design's paid for.
But the 350 is
right.
Actual doing the work.
Right.
Not the design.
Right.
Okay.
Barbara?
I appreciate that comment too, because I've stood there so many times and I can't figure which way I go out because it all looks the same. So I'm glad you're doing that. But I know that a lot of the delay sometimes is in the other end of it, delay in getting back the next level of design and that kind of thing, and people get held up because, somebody who's working for them hasn't gotten their material in on time and so forth. So I can appreciate, because I think you really have to do the job right, and we don't want, that old haste makes waste thing. And I need to ask you for something that maybe you're, in addition to what you're doing now, that maybe others aren't experiencing the same thing. But, we get a very controversial project rezoning or conditional use permit or something.
Only in Princess Anne.
Only in Princess Anne, but we've had a whole lot of them lately.
In Princess Anne.
In Princess Anne, right.
And there's more to come.
Nothing happens.
Just the past 14 years.
Nothing happens for a long time.
Oh, Lord.
And
That's what I've noticed.
I know that a lot of it is, okay, somebody got something approved, and, then people start asking me, well, what happened to so-and-so? And I say, well, I don't know, because once we've done our thing, then we sort of lose sight of it. Is there any way that, particularly, and I think you all know which ones are the controversial ones, that you all can maybe every 6 months let us know where something is? Maybe the applicant has just simply not moved forward.
Right.
Or, because, when I was stopped in the Home Depot Sunday afternoon to be told that the Osprey had come back to that tower on Salem Road, I thought the tower was down and all taken care of by this time. Some of these things the projects drag out a long time. And I know that staff has to wait until they have something submitted to be able to follow through. But then the public doesn't know, and we don't really know where things are. Have I made it complicated enough?
No, yes is the answer.
Yes, you
So there's no problem with that. I mean, we'd be glad to do that.
let us know where the status is.
I don't think we want to give you every project that we get submitted, because you would get 70 or 85 every Monday morning. So, but we can certainly identify that. We did that with the Cavalier. We kept the neighborhood involved when the site plan was submitted, what the status of it was. So that's what you're asking for.
Yes.
So I think I know what the projects are. We'll get you a list. Anybody has a specific project you want to track, let us know. We'll be glad to let you know what's happening with it.
Okay,
Not a
appreciate
problem.
Other questions or comments? Barry, I just want to sit back and say to you that I know planning's been beat up. I want to acknowledge that, and that we got great faith in the people, you and the people that work there.
It's pretty scary.
But, no, I'm speaking for the entire council. I mean,
All right, thank
because we
you.
really do care. We are asking for that extra effort right now.
Right.
But we got great faith that this thing is going to be as smooth as it can be in the months to come, because we're all working together as a team, and we look forward to great improvement. But no, we are supporting you all.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
the best I can answer.
Hey, council,
Thank
we're
you.
going to take a 5-minute break. Okay?
As you wish, sir.
Thank you. We'll start at 4:20. It's gonna be.
Utilities.
Yes, sir, we
and
will.
And I've asked Tom Leahy, our interim DCM, to introduce the acting public utilities.
And ask Tom how much money he had, how much cash he had.
Just barely enough, Mayor. Barely enough. Anyway, Mayor and members of council, I'd like to introduce Bob Montague. Bob is the interim Director of Public Utilities, while I'm the interim Deputy City Manager. Before that, he's been the manager of the business division for about 15 years, although he has also done some stints as interim division manager for operations and engineering divisions in public utilities. But Bob and his people are really the ones that are responsible for the AAA rating that public utilities has. They're responsible for collecting $185 million of revenue from 3 separate enterprises funds. They do it with an efficiency that makes the entire utility industry, whether it's the public side or the private side, envious. Just would like to give a hand for Bob Montague.
Thank you.
Bob, that's a first.
Well, lots of interims.
We're glad to have you.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here to present our FY17 budget. We'll start with our mission, which is very straightforward, and that's to provide the highest quality and most reliable public water supply and wastewater collection services. We do so 365 days a year on a 24/7 basis, and we strive to do so at the lowest practical cost. The importance of providing quality services and quality water services in particular has never been more apparent than what's been going on. I'm sure you've all been watching with the lead contamination event that's impacted the community in Flint, Michigan. In Virginia Beach, we're fortunate where we have a much happier story to tell. Lead as a contaminant has been regulated by the EPA with required testing going back to 1992. And Virginia Beach has been proactive in implementing all required testing, and we've also been very fortunate in that our testing results have always been well under federal action levels. In fact, our most recent round of testing just last year showed 90% of our samples were below the lowest detection limit of 1 part per billion. And the remaining 10% of our samples that had minute levels of lead within them had an average score of 5 parts per billion, which is still well below the federal action limit of 15 parts per billion. So we have a good story to tell with lead. We were also proactive years ago in implementing what's called a low lead or a no lead specification for our water meters and the fittings that we use in the water distribution system. That specification was in place in 2007, which was a full 7 years before the EPA mandated that it be in place. So we've had a good story to tell there, and we're very fortunate that our water quality meets and exceeds all standards for quality. We're in this position, we feel, in large part for 3 reasons. One, most importantly, this council saw fit to go out and secure a quality and reliable water source for our community through the Lake Gaston Water Supply Project. Council has also committed to investing responsibly into our infrastructure. And lastly, we're very fortunate where we have excellent treatment facilities in our partnership with the City of Norfolk. And we also implement very good distribution system management practices through routine mainline flushing that you may see our crews doing at the fire hydrants and through regular testing. So we'll move on to some recent accomplishments. This time last year, Tom was telling you about a newly formatted city services bill, and we did that in part through recommendations from council. The goal with that formatting was to improve the clarity for our customers. We have many customers who think of the bill as the water bill and don't realize the full slate of services that are included on that bill. So with the new formatting, we added some graphical service icons to represent each of the services included on the bill. We also included a pie chart to show the proportional amounts for each of the charges that are included on the bill as well. A customer feedback over the past year into our call center and to folks that we know around town as well has been what I would characterize as being universally positive. We think it's done just what we hoped it would do. In addition to this formatting work, we've been working hard in the last several years trying to improve our electronic billing and payment services that we offer our customers. As you see that second bullet point, we have 22% of our customer base now participating in our e-bill service. The industry average is around 10%, so we are well over, we're double that figure, and our customers see it as a great convenience, particularly given that we have lots of customers who are on the go. We have a strong, as you know, military presence in the community. So no longer do our customers have to be at home to receive their bill. If they have their smartphone or their web-enabled tablet, then they have access to their water bill. In addition to being a great convenience for them, it's a win-win in that it helps our bottom line as well. With this rate of participation in this coming year, we'll see a savings in excess of $150,000 that we would otherwise spend on paper, postage, and handling cost. And just recently, in fact, in late January, we added a new electronic payment service that works with the e-bill service. So our e-bill customers now have the option with a single click of the mouse or a tap on their smartphone device, they can pay their bill with a single click. Actually, full disclosure, it's 2 clicks. Once you click the first one, you get an authorization screen that says you really want to make that payment. And our customers are seeing it as a super convenient service. In February, which was the first full month that it was out and available to our e-bill customers, we saw that a full 1/3 of those e-bill customers were choosing to use the service. So it's really been well received. Moving on to another accomplishment, in July, Public Utilities assumed day-to-day account management responsibilities for the stormwater charges that are included on the bill. Previously, if we got questions into the Public Utilities call center, unless it was something that was a very simple response, those calls would get transferred to staff members in Public Works for resolution. In an effort to try and improve customer service and make for a more seamless customer experience, Public Utilities incorporated those folks into our call center. So now, if you have questions related to any charge on the city services bill, those are being answered in a one-stop shop. And finally, last year we completed a number of important CIP projects. We've chosen to represent one of those here. We completed and brought online the new Nimmo water tank, which in addition to being a beautiful new storage facility, it adds for enhanced capacity and reliability in the southern portion of our water distribution system. So we'll move on to some good news. With this budget, we continue to have the lowest water supply charge in the area, and the second lowest for combined water and sanitary sewer charges. We still trail the city of Portsmouth by a smidgen, but nonetheless, we remain very competitive in that regard in the region.
That's not too bad, considering we didn't have any water a number of years ago.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you, Lois.
And, yes, I was here.
We need Portsmouth a lot better place.
I'll tell you, a few of us were around, yeah.
Well, we used to be the highest, and we've been enjoying watching it become lower and lower comparatively.
Remember when we couldn't water our lawn?
I couldn't wash your car.
The
That's
restaurant's
right.
gonna get water, right?
Yeah, you need to stop flushing. I'm sorry, but it is something worth noting when you sit back there and have a comment like that and know the total heck we went through with water. You know, it's just wonderful.
Well, Mayor, one of my first roles in the city was as the water conservation coordinator.
You wouldn't have been here without that water shortage.
I enjoy being past it, though.
Water conservation czar.
We
Thank
also
you.
continue to enjoy excellent ratings from the 3 rating agencies. We have 2 AAA ratings and the highest AA rating. We also consistently, as Tom was mentioning before, we do a good job of collecting our revenues. Last year,
Ratings
we're at
goes on in cash, you said.
99.5% collection rate of our billed revenues, and that puts us among the very best in the utility industry. And we're also a leader in system performance and customer service by any measure. I was just looking the other day at some of our metrics, and our numbers for last year for sanitary sewer overflows were at 0.9 SSOs per 100 miles of pipe. And that's a phenomenal number. The industry average is about 5. If you can get down to 2 or 3, you're doing really well, and we're coming in at 0.9. So what we're finding is that some of our programs we have in place, our Find and Fix program, our fat, soil, and grease program, the mainline TVing and cleaning that we're doing, all are paying big dividends for us. And now to some even better news. There are no rate increases included in our FY17 budget. We're able to maintain our existing rates by cash funding the FY17 capital program using pay-as-you-go and cash from our net assets. You can see in this chart that we had a steady increase in our sanitary sewer rates through FY15, which were supporting our obligations under the consent order. But with HRSD assuming responsibility for the wet weather management component of the consent order, that's enabled us to avoid that ramp up in our CIP that was planned and the debt service that would come along with that. So with that fact and the prudent use of our net assets, those things combined will enable us to maintain our existing rates in fiscal year 17. The next slide is actually our operating budget. It's $123.7 million, which represents just over a 2.5% increase over the previous year's budget. The drivers for this increase include funding to restore pay-as-you-go to historical levels. We had taken a step back last year and had moved it down $1.5 million to $6.5 million, and this year we've added it back up to get it to historical levels at $8 million. We've also included funding to transition our analog radios to digital capable radios as part of a citywide replacement program. I'll draw your attention to a few areas of significant change. One of them is a bit of a distortion. The Retiree Healthcare and Reserves Program Unit actually was what for the column in FY16. We included compensation reserves that had already been distributed to salary, so it doesn't appear in that figure where those reserves do appear in the FY17 column. So that accounts for that distortion. Transfers to other funds were impacted by that increased pay-as-you-go funding, so that accounts for that difference. The business division has some increases associated with some of that radio replacement funding, as well as the stormwater account management program being incorporated into that business unit that I discussed earlier. You'll see that there's a fairly significant decrease in our operations division, and that's more of a timing function. This is a historically low year for us in terms of our replacement of our rolling stock. So that's fortuitous in helping us to maintain our rates. So we'll move on. The next chart shows our expenditures. In public utilities, our expenditures are always have 3 major categories. The first is our people. Our personnel is 25%. Debt service comes in at 21%, and our water services contract with Norfolk is at 20%. And the last major part of that pie is the transfers and reserves. The bulk of that is made up by our pay-as-you-go funding. That's where that resides at $8 million, and a right-of-way fee of $4 million that we transfer to the general fund each year. Moving on to revenues. In public utilities, the story of our revenues is our sewer and water charges. That along, and to a lesser extent, our water and sewer connection fees make up 96% of our revenues. An interesting aspect or trend with our revenues is that our sewer charges are making up more and more of our total revenues as time goes on, and this is attributed to the run-up in our sewer rates associated with our obligations under the consent order. And then there's a national trend or decline in water demand, and we're seeing that. Last year, for example, our water charges were 43% of this pie chart, and we see that slow decline. This year it's at 42%. And there was an interesting study that was released just today by the Water Research Foundation, which is confirming what we have been thinking for years. And these water efficient appliances that I used to be pushing when I was water conservation coordinator are doing their job. The ultra-low flush toilets, which we've been pushing for years in public utilities, and more recently the high-efficiency washing machines in particular offer huge opportunities for saving for residential customers. And the study that came out today actually reflected that water usage in residential homes from 1999 has declined 22%, and we in the utility industry are seeing that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. New water resources, as every one of you know, in this room, are expensive to develop, and I know it doesn't hurt Tom's feelings, and it doesn't hurt mine if we can extend our existing water resources as far out into the future as we can. So the next slide will go over a few of the FY17 budget highlights. Most importantly, all current services will be maintained and funded within our current rates and existing revenues. No new debt service will be issued in support of the FY17 capital program, which comes in at $32.4 million. At that level, we'll continue to address our aging infrastructure needs, and it will ensure that we remain in full compliance with all regulatory mandates. This budget also allows us to eliminate 4 FTEs as a part of planned process enhancements in our operations division and associated right-sizing of resources. None of our employees will be impacted. This is being done as part of a planned effort and moving these employees into other positions. Lastly, this budget, as I mentioned before, will allow us to replace our analog radios with the digital capable radios as part of our citywide initiative. So with that, we'll move on to any questions that you may have.
Any questions, James?
I saw up there you have no FTEs dedicated to Lake Gaston, so there's nobody there on site?
We have a contracted firm that provides services for us.
Up there for Lake Gaston operations?
Yes.
All right. Then with respect to the bond rates, and I don't know, maybe Catherine or Patty's still here, question, is that reasonably unusual to have such high rates for a utility? I mean, I was under the assumption that you didn't really see a lot of AAA rated utilities that often. I mean, it seems to me that would be we should be reasonably unusual there. Is that?
Well, what makes it unusual for us is that we are only a moderate-sized utility.
Right.
We're not a very large
Exactly.
utility. We don't have a growing customer base, not rapidly growing, and we don't have, and we do have this aging infrastructure. Normally, I would say if I was part of the rating agency, I might be tougher on us, but I'm not the rating agencies. 2 of the 3 of them think because of our strong financial management and because of this net assets
Say the word.
that you're always.
Cash.
Well,
The word is cash.
It's called the unrestricted cash in our net assets, which is funding that CIP, by the way. Because of that and the strong financial management,
That
we get
cash
those
speaks
AAA
volumes.
ratings. There are other utilities that get AAA. Northern Virginia, Fairfax County Water Authority would
Which
get
is
it.
a good bit bigger, I would imagine.
Much bigger and much richer, I would say. So there are some utilities that have it, but it is quite an accomplishment, not just to Bob and his staff, but to finance and their staff. It's a partnership. It is the strong financial management. And one of the points made at every single bond rating agency is that this council, we have a partnership with the staff. Bringing rate increases that aren't justified and you have not turned them down, and that carries a lot of weight. The rating agencies actually put those exact words in our last rating. So this council is as responsible for it as anything else.
As a team effort, we thank you all for everything you do. Any other questions or
I
comments?
have a
Louis?
question that's really not related to your budget, but I was at a meeting concerning the airport and the issue of the FAA and so forth, being hesitant to grant permission for a second runway. And one of the things that was brought up was, Tom, you might want to listen. One of the things that was brought up was the issue of Lake Whitehurst and the impact that the runway would have on Lake Whitehurst. And there was a question as to whether it would impact the water quality of Lake Whitehurst. But it's been my understanding that for years, we're really not, Norfolk's really not dependent on water out of Lake Whitehurst, is it?
Well, that's part of their in-town system, but that in-town system is only about 10% of the supply because of the addition, when I talk about both cities, it's about 10% of the total of Norfolk, Virginia Beach supply because Lake Gaston practically doubled the supply when we brought it in. The whole airport drains to the Norfolk in-town lakes. They do a very good job of managing that runoff and through BMPs and those types of things. But I think that is part of that runway extension goes right into part of the lake, so you have to be careful about it. Yeah. But I'd be surprised if Norfolk, their staff, I hadn't heard that they considered it a water quality issue. It may just be something that, because it involves the lakes, the environmental reviews require that you do some kind of analysis. Yeah. But I'll follow up on it. Yeah.
Other questions or comments? Thanks so much for everything y'all do over there.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Is it Phil's turn?
It is, sir. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Phil, it's always a pleasure to have you too. How much cash you have, Phil?
I wouldn't tell you if I were
What you gonna give me, man?
Let me check.
Just finished paying his water bill.
That was a good one.
Okay, we'll try to get through this pretty quick. Just as an overview, there's a lot of things on this overview sheet, but the last 4 bullets are the CIP presentations that we have previously given to City Council, so we're not talking about all of those today. You've seen them once, you don't need to see those again today. So we'll talk about basically the 4 different funds that we have that control our operating budget. Looking at the overall budget, let me first put your attention to the very bottom line. In FY16, our total budget was $201 million. In FY17, the proposed budget is $201 million, and our FTE counts 902.88 and 902.88. So we have no additional positions, and we have virtually no new money that we're looking for. If you'd like me to continue, I will, but if that's
We're ready to
good.
move on. Just give us the highlights.
Okay. In the general fund, we are moving 20 positions that are mosquito control positions from the general fund over to stormwater. There's a good nexus there, and our permit actually requires that we report all of our mosquito control activity within our stormwater permit, so that makes sense. In the waste management fund, we are down 8 positions. We're actually eliminating 9 positions and adding 1 additional position for an accountant, which will help us do some fund management a lot better than we're able to do today. In our stormwater utility, we do have some additional positions. 20 of those are, again, from the mosquito control. 3 additional positions are added for trying to keep up and get a handle on our stormwater regulation requirements. Our fuel budget, we have reduced that by $1 million, and we still have a little bit of reserve within what we have, the 5.5 that's left. And we think we're going to be pretty comfortable with that. That's all based on the reduced prices for fuel. In our capital project fund for light rail, we have 5 additional positions. These are positions that will man the light rail office as we are setting that up down at the town center area. Looking at the overall budget, the overall operating budget, our revenues, we have a total budget of about $201 million, revenues and fees about $180 million, and the remaining general fund support is only 11% of that budget. With our overall expenditures, unlike a lot of the departments in the city, our personnel expense is 31% of the total budget. That's a fairly low number. We have a lot of operating expenses, a lot of materials, contracts, utility costs that we pay for, and we try to keep our personnel expenses as low as we can. Looking at just a few selected accomplishments and work that's going to be under construction in FY17. On the left-hand side, some selected completed projects, and you can go through that at your own leisure. One I would point out that's a fairly significant project is the Princess Anne Road, Kempsville Road intersection. On the right side, projects that are going to be under construction, we have, just on that side, there's $387 million worth of projects. And as you look through the list, you can see some are fairly significant projects. Some are under construction now, some will be shortly. Kempsville Recreation Center, Human Resource Center, Indian River Road, Kempsville Road intersection, Witch Duck Road Phase 2, Burton Station Phases 1 and 2, Holland Road Phase 6, and Lesnar Bridge, and also Lynn Haven Parkway Phase 11. Okay, getting into some of the specific funds within the general fund. The general fund makes up about $65 million in the Public Works operating budget. Not quite half of that is personnel expense, and the rest is either a small amount for capital expense and then some operating expenses, materials, contracts, service costs. Within the general fund, some of the things that we do, and this is not an exhaustive list, but our traffic signal system, our street maintenance, dredging, keeping Rudy Inlet open, and navigational aids, maintaining the bridges, doing all of the building maintenance for the city, our program and project management of all of the city CIP programs that we're managing. And that also gets into the construction and inspection and payment of our utility bills. I keep bringing up the utility bills because that is a significant part of the overall budget. It's in excess of $20 million per year. Some of the trends that we are seeing with our general fund budget: an increased demand for beach maintenance at our outlaying beaches. We do a really good job at Sandbridge of beach nourishment, not so much on cleaning. We don't get it cleaned as often as we could. We do a very good job of taking care of the resort beach in the north end. The outlying beaches, we still don't have quite the effort that we need there. We need a bigger presence at Sandbridge. We need a bigger presence at the Bay Beaches. All of that we think will come with time. Expansion of our fiber optic cable system. We started out connecting all of our traffic signals. We are now adding other city facilities and working with ComIT. Hopefully we'll get all of the city facilities, including the schools and everything, combined into one system. And we think that'll be a good thing for the city. Our pavement resurfacing cycle is not where we would like it to be. We are at about a 28-year cycle now. We would certainly like to be at a 15-year cycle. That's what the industry recommends. We have not gotten there in the past, and I'm not sure when we will get there. 28 is probably a little bit high for us. So we've done a little bit of reorganization in Public Works, particularly with our facilities management group, where we had our engineering people were in one part of the department, our maintenance people in another, energy people in another. We've combined all of those into one facilities management group with Tom Nicholas leading that effort, and we are making great strides. And we're assuming some custodial services from the aquarium this year, and where they had 8 FTEs doing that work, we're doing it by contract with them. This just shows you what our resurfacing cycle is. Again, 28 years is where we are now. If you look, we've never really been less than about 20 years, but we will need to turn that around. We've got $10 million a year going in right now. So we'll just need to increase that over the years coming. With our fleet and fuels fund, this is our city garage effort and also paying our fuel bills. We're spending about $13.3 million on vehicle maintenance and $5.5 million on fuel this year. We have a total of 78 FTEs in that group. Some of the fleet facts, we have 10 different shops that we operate. We have over 3,700 vehicles and pieces of equipment that are actually into over 260 different class codes of equipment. So we don't just have one thing we maintain. We have a flat rate labor at $67 an hour and about a 4.5 day average turnaround for all of our maintenance. We are right now doing over 30,000 work orders per year and almost 3,000 preventive maintenance efforts per year. So the guys stay extremely busy. Our fuel consumption is averaging about 2.4 million gallons per year, and that breaks out fairly closely between unleaded gas and diesel. The numbers are almost the same. Consumption is remaining very steady. It has not changed much over the years. If we look at the cost, our cost going into next year is $2.06. We think we're in pretty good stead with that number. Our prices as of this morning for diesel were $1.26, and for unleaded $1.48. We still think the 206 is a good number, though. Our fleet asset replacement, we are at $5.1 million a year for replacing the fleet. As you can see with the red line, we do have a decreasing backlog. The backlog just a few years ago was about 30 million. It's down to 18 million now, and it's trending pretty well. Our stormwater fund, total budget about 39, almost $40 million. All but just a very, very small amount of that comes from the fees that we charge. And the answer to your question, Mayor, how much money do we have? Our unrestricted reserve is $20 million.
Thank you, sir.
We have shown you this chart in the past. We have three major areas that we look at, which are water quality, flood control, and operations and maintenance. And those are all integrated very nicely. With our O&M effort, these are some of the components that we maintain. I will say that our off-road ditch program, we have 160 miles. We're maintaining those at somewhere between a 10 and 12-year cycle. We still have a goal to get down to an 8-year cycle on those. Our lake dredging program, we have 776 to inspect and 491 that we maintain. We're on about a 95-year cycle to dredge those, which, in the future, maybe we'll get better than that. We're currently maintaining or dredging somewhere between 2 and 4 per year. One of our newer things that we're looking at and being required to do is a lot more maintenance on dams and spillways. We have 58 of those. About half of those are going to be regulated by other agencies, and that means we've got a lot more work to do when it becomes a regulated dam. A lot of these are just like subdivision dams that were put in to block off a finger of one of the rivers, and if they have trees on them, if it becomes a regulated dam, then the trees have to be removed. We've got we're trying to go through that effort to determine which ones we're going to have to maintain more. Our stormwater quality and surface water regulatory compliance, this is getting to be a really, really big thing with us. And again, we do owe you one more presentation that we'll come back and do, I guess, after we get through the budget, and talk to you a little bit more about some of the requirements and the costs that we're looking at there. With our flood control, in the operating budget, the projects are for the most part in the CIP, but in the operating budget, this is where we have our program and project management people, and they are the ones who identify the flood control projects and do all the work to get them designed and constructed. And let's see. All right. So street sweeping. We have two different efforts that we're working. Up until this year, all of our efforts were in-house sweeping, and it was not a very big effort. And we do oceanfront sweeping nightly during the season. We do town center weekly, and we did a little bit of sweeping of major arterial roads. This year, council approved some additional money so we could hire more people and buy more equipment. At the same time, we were asked to look at doing contracted sweeping as an alternative. We've developed a package that has been out on the street for a while. Bids open April 21st. We know that we have probably 5 or 6 very interested street sweeping contractors, and they come from all over the country. So we think we're going to get some decent bids, and we'll be back to let you guys know how we do with that.
Let me inject here. Right in the middle of this process, the EPA injected a change in the type of sweepers that we were allowed to use to try and get some kind of credit with regards to the TMDL. So the guys had to go back and take a look at this. It's not a positive formula change by any means. with regards to whether or not we can get credit for the work that we put in there, but they demanded a specific type of street sweeper. And so this whole TMDL compliance and, do you get credit for dredging your lakes? Do you get credit for dredging your SSD navigation projects where the stormwater's filled up, the sediment from that's going in there? And do you get credit for nitrogen and phosphorus removal? Nothing is kind and nothing is favorable and nothing is returning the value that you need for the investments we're gonna make, both with the private volunteer SSDs and then what we're gonna end up having to put into it through our fee structures and stormwater or wherever we go with general fund augmentation. So we're coming back to you. It's a big number.
And in addition to different sweepers, you have to sweep 6 times per year to get any credit at all on the.
We've lost our mind in Washington, let me say that publicly. And no one up there realizes what it takes to fund a local jurisdiction to try and be compliant to this.
Okay, Barbara has a question. Jim's got a couple, and then, because we're gonna be getting behind here, we're gonna wind this one up. Go ahead, Barbara.
I guess you're gonna be making us a TMDL presentation soon, just what, and you don't have to answer today, you can just name a lot of things that we don't get credit for. Have they decided yet what we do get credit for? Because I'm not so sure we've even seen that.
We are still working through some of that, and hopefully when we come back, we'll have a much better picture. It still may not be complete, but it will be much better than it is now.
Jim, you had a couple of questions.
I did. Are y'all done?
No.
I can wait till the end if that's okay.
Okay,
Unless you want me
all
to
right.
Do it now, Mayor, I will.
Let's get it done, because,
Okay.
we really like what you're doing, Phil. We got great faith in you, and we're gonna be running out of time. Go ahead, Jim.
So ask my questions,
Yes,
okay?
you can.
All right, first off, with respect to the repaving, I get a lot of positive
Right.
comments about that. Thank you very much, because that's something that citizens see. The one comment I always get is, my street's fine, but you need to pave this street over here, and, whatever. People are getting their roads paved, and I think that's outstanding. With respect to some of the budget questions, one of the ones I asked had a spreadsheet in it. Is it possible to get this electronically, the actual Excel spreadsheet that this came with? And then going with that, and this is a fleet management question, because, the question I had, I was kind of surprised that the 2 Tahoes that they had requested for the volunteers, and that we approved in last budget just now got delivered, I guess, last month. So from July 1st to March is an extended length of time. And there was a good response to this, explaining why there was a specific delay on that. But, as I go through this, through the response that y'all provided, it talks about, okay, so it was ordered 30 days after the budget, so that's 30 days there. Takes 60 days based on this to receive the vehicle, apparently in Massachusetts. So you order it from a local dealership, it's delivered to Massachusetts, drop shipped there. Then it says it takes 60 to 90 days to upfit it in Massachusetts. Then somewhere between 7 and 30 days to transfer it from Massachusetts back to Virginia Beach, depending upon the number of vehicles coming from Massachusetts to Virginia Beach. 30 days for radios while it's in Virginia Beach, and then a question mark number of days for a pre-delivery inspection from the local dealership, who presumably we bought it from. When you add all that up, it's anywhere from 190 to 240 days. Backing out the issue with EMS and the question on their budget, you can take 40 days off of that based on what I could see here. But that still seems like an inordinate amount of time to get a vehicle that is a standard vehicle throughout the nation, for, in this case, a Tahoe PPV vehicle. And I'm just wondering, there's got to be a better way to do it than not take half a year to get vehicles, because that just seems to me that there's got to be a more efficient way to do that.
Right.
And
How about if we look at that and see what kind of improvements we can make?
I'd appreciate that, because it just doesn't
Okay.
make sense to me.
Okay. All right, mosquito control is the last thing I was going to talk about within the stormwater fund, and again, this is where we transferred 20 FTEs out of the general fund into stormwater. And that, yeah, what I didn't say here is, what about Zika virus? Because that's what everybody's asking us about now. And we are working with the health department. We're working with HRPDC and other localities to put together a very good educational campaign. I will say there's one mosquito that transmits the Zika virus, which is the Asian tiger. And the southern way of saying that is Aedes aegypti. I'm not sure whether that's the correct pronunciation, but it's close. And it basically is a mosquito that grows in your backyard. And the best control for it is make sure you don't have standing water in your backyard. So that particular mosquito is not one that grows up in the swamps. It does grow in the backyards, and it doesn't travel very far. It stays pretty much local to your yard or your neighbor's yard. So we've got a lot of education that's going to go out on that very soon. It's a little early, but as soon as the weather begins to break, that will be going out. The stormwater utility trends that you see up here are the same ones that you saw when we did the presentation earlier on the stormwater CIP. And basically it says everything's getting more complicated, everything's getting more expensive. And the money that we have that we are generating from the fee today will not sustain us in the future. Okay, within the Waste Management Fund, this is the fund where we do have a rate increase proposed, and it's a rate increase from $21.36 per month to $23 per month. So it's a rate increase of $1.64. Our revenue is currently, and with the rate increase, is projected to be about $34.8 million. We still, in the current year, in the FY17 year, have $10 million of general fund support, and this is to cover that gap area where when we lost our rate cap with SIPSA, we've got some extra money that we have to pay. The services we provide, we've got automated trash collection, 130,000 tons, yard debris, 44,000, bulky items, 5,000. And we've got our resource and recovery center at the landfill. And we've got recycling that's about 32,000 tons, and that's collected every week. We're doing a huge amount of education for our recycling, but quite frankly, the numbers are still going down. Our participation rates are up. They're still very good, but as print media begins to fade away from what we do, people aren't reading papers, they're not reading newspapers like they used to. We are seeing the tonnages are dropping on the recycling. Okay, we're trying to do a lot of things to control costs. With our automation, we've done a lot of route optimization. We are saving about $1.1 million a year with route optimization. We have also eliminated about $2.7 million of equipment inventory. In our bulk items, we've just changed the way we do bulk item collection. We've changed the vehicles we use, and we've reduced from 2 to 1 operators per truck. And we are disposing of that material at our landfill rather than paying $125 a ton. We are saving about $450,000 a year. We can do that and still stay within the 95% requirement of taking our waste stream to SIPSA. Our yard debris collections, we have a new contract that came into place within the last year, saving us $600,000 a year. We've done some routing changes there, and that's allowed us to reduce some additional FTEs. And we have converted 3 permanent positions to some contracts so that we have a lot of seasonal impacts with yard debris, so we'll bring on the contract workers as we need them. And overall, since 2009, we've reduced 28.5 FTEs. Looking at our services, in total, we have a waste stream of about 224,500 tons, and we have a diversion rate where it goes somewhere other than the landfill of 92%. Our equipment replacement, we do have an additional $500,000 that goes into the budget this year for equipment replacement, and that gets us up to $2.2 million a year. That gets us into the replacement cycles that we think are necessary to sustain the operation. And if you notice, it also reduces our inventory from 107 to 91 vehicles. Our fee, as back in 2011, we did not have a fee. We were part of the general fund. This shows how the fee has been implemented and has grown over the years. And in FY17, again, we have a proposal for a rate increase, and we'll be at $23. And the drivers behind that, we have at the end of FY15, we had a negative fund balance. We have additional funding needs, the $500,000 that we just talked about. Our risk management charges have increased quite a bit. Our city garage charges have increased quite a bit. And we have GASB pension liability that, because we are an enterprise fund, we have to account for. And we need to develop a little bit of fund reserve, and it's been suggested that 25% is probably a good number on that. So in looking at that, we went through 2 different exercises, one with SCS engineers who are under contract with the city, and another working with management services and finance. And interestingly, both efforts gave us pretty much the same conclusion, and almost to the penny the same amount that we needed to increase the fee. And how do we compare with other people in the area? At $23, the only other locality that has a lower rate is the city of Suffolk, and that's because they pay no disposal fee. This is a chart that you've seen in the past, and it just shows, if you look at the far right-hand column, the $10 million is the amount in FY17 that is general fund support of the enterprise fund. And in FY18, we have another $6 million that we would still be looking for. And just a very, very quick update on where we are with SIPSA. As you all know, SIPSA did solicit, and they received 3 proposals. Repower South is the one that they issued a notice of intent to award. There was a protest of that from Wheelabrator. SIPSA responded back denying the protest, and the date has passed for Wheelabrator to file an appeal, and they did not file an appeal. So with SIPSA, we will continue moving ahead with trying to come to a use and support agreement for all of the localities. And where we are with that today, Virginia Beach City Council passed a resolution, and it said basically 3 things that we'll go over. One is we need to have a good neighbor agreement with Suffolk, and we need to have that so we can ensure a long-term disposal at the Suffolk landfill, so that if the repower or whatever does not work in the future, we have a place to dispose of our solid waste. That's moving ahead and could be resolved as early as the end of this month. City Council also said we needed to have a new conditional use permit for Cell 7 at the regional landfill. Work has begun on that, and we are hopeful that that will come to a conclusion this calendar year. And there still needs to be a little bit more work done on commercial waste because the repower facility is not really sized as we see it today to take on commercial waste. So we still have some work to do with SIPSA on accommodating that. And just a summary of significant issues in total for Public Works. We need to resolve the post-2018 SIPSA. Sea level rise and recurrent flooding is going to continue to live with us. Coastal resiliency for our beach nourishment, and also increasing stormwater requirements with our regulations is something we'll be dealing with into the future. So, any other questions?
Well, we certainly thank you for a great presentation, Phil. Y'all do a great job. We thank you for all everything you do over there. All right, Mr. Hanson, we
Yes, sir.
got 2 more to get done
And we're
in
gonna get
44
through.
minutes.
We're gonna do this.
Okay.
Yes, sir, we're
Just-
perfectly on time. Back
Just
up,
keep her-
stretch a little
keep
bit.
her there.
They're filing in. Reggie, John, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank y'all very
Michelle,
much.
thank you. You did a great job on the charts. And
Dr.
we're gonna
Kohlberg
move to
first.
family and youth opportunities, sir. And we're gonna have 2 briefings. We're gonna have health and human service. Heidi, yeah, the doc is in the house.
And we're glad to have you.
Thank you, and I'm really glad to be here, so yay. Because you guys have some really good stamina, it looks like. Watching out in the TV room, I'm like, wow, okay. You ready to jump into it?
Yes, ma'am. Let's go.
Okay, so, good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and Mr. Hanson today, so woohoo.
Yes, ma'am.
As a resident of Virginia Beach, first off, I want to thank you for being very good stewards of my tax money and for providing amazing services. So thank you. As a department head, I want to thank you for your support and your funding to enable the health department to fulfill our vision of being a community that lives well, plays well, and stays well. Here's our operating budget. You can see that from last year to this year, we're virtually identical. We go down a smidge simply because one person left and we hired someone who was a little less experienced, so they get a little less pay, but otherwise, we're pretty much matching what we did last year. Next. By revenue and expenses, revenue-wise, it's primarily a grant that comes to our Healthy Start program for maternal child health. We also get some of that money that was unused in our prior budget year. We get that 45-55% mix back. Some of that goes into the city. As far as expenses, it's primarily our operations, which is almost entirely the cooperative budget matching component of the city to the state for our mandatory funds. You see there's a smaller sliver, and that's for our 9.8 FTEs that are actually city employees. So, touching upon some significant issues, figure we'd highlight epidemics as well as our Affordable Care Act this year. So diving right in, I heard that Phil already touched upon Zika a little bit. So this year, this year it's Zika, last year it was Ebola, we don't know what the future will hold, but right now we're going to deal with Zika. Zika first got introduced to the world in 1947 in Uganda. We didn't really hear about it or have it in headlines until Brazil declared an epidemic in May of last year. In February 1st of this year, the World Health Organization declared Zika a public health emergency of international concern. So it raised the level. We're all looking at it at this point. As of the 6th of April, there are 346 laboratory confirmed cases in the United States, 9 of which are here in Virginia. The good news is all of those were travel related, so either someone who had traveled to an epidemic area or someone who had had sexual relations with a person who had traveled, or unfortunately in a few cases, mothers transmitting it to their infant. This is primarily a mosquito-borne illness, as Phil was saying. It's actually the Aedes albopictus is the Asian tiger mosquito. We do have them here.
Much better than Phil did.
Well, thank you, thank you. But Phil's an awesome partner. Public Works is wonderful, and their mosquito control lab is someone we've been in constant contact with. We work really well with them. The nice thing about the Asian tiger is they are pretty lazy. They don't fly really far, and they not only feed on humans, but they also feed on dogs and cats. They feed on animals. So they're not as good at transmitting it as their cousin, the Aedes aegypti that Phil mentioned, and we don't have any aegypti in our area. But take-home message with any of the Zika, really for individuals and for our community, is get rid of any of the water standing in containers in your yards. If we can do that, if we can demolish the habitats, in their breeding grounds, then we wouldn't have any problems with mosquitoes and we wouldn't have any local transmission. And that's what we're shooting for. Right now throughout the U.S., there is not local transmission. Now, public health, we deal in surveillance, monitoring, data, education every day. It's our bread and butter. The Virginia Department of Health is actually the lead agency for the Virginia Zika Task Force that the governor convened in February. The goal is to prepare for and respond to any local transmission. Again, there is not any. Right now, measures are being put in place to have sustainable strategies for communication and information sharing, for investigation and surveillance, for data and monitoring, for lab testing, vector control, education and outreach to pregnant women, because as I'm sure you're aware, reading the papers, Zika, in 8 out of 10 people, they don't have any symptoms. And even the people who have symptoms, for the most part, they're pretty mild. A fever, a rash, some conjunctivitis, so looking like you've got pink eye, and some achy joints for a couple days to a week. For most people, it's not a big deal. Unfortunately, if you're pregnant and in your first trimester, there's a high likelihood of having fetal deformities. And the microcephaly, the small heads and unfortunately corresponding small brains, is really where it captured the world's attention in Brazil. That's how, all the concern got started, is they realized there was a higher number of babies born with microcephaly, and they started tracing it back to figure out what was going on. Here, as Phil mentioned, we've got great partnerships. We are in constant contact with Public Works. We're a trusted source of information for the healthcare providers and our hospitals, so we've been working with them. We've actually, here in Virginia Beach, we've tested over 400 people for Zika. Only 9 have been positive, and again, they were all travelers or related to travelers. Switching gears, just to our daily prevention in the health department, to remind you that, immunizations is something we do every day. We administered over 6,000 immunizations to underserved or uninsured people last year. We also do daily surveillance and monitoring. We actually investigated nearly 600 different investigations last year with 350 cases of communicable diseases, and then our environmental health specialists conduct food inspections. We did over 5,500 last year of the 1,547 restaurants that we have in this area. So that's some of our bread and butter. Now, unfortunately, the next epidemic, is a man-made one. The opioid and heroin overdose epidemic. And fatal drug overdoses are now the #1 cause of injury death in the United States and in Virginia. The CDC has declared this a national epidemic. And unfortunately, Virginia Beach is excelling at this in a way that we don't want to. The Virginia Department of Health compiled information from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office for 2007 to 2014. We had the second highest number of deaths in the state. 2/3 of those were prescription drug overdoses, so pain pills, narcotic pain medicines. 1/3 were either heroin alone or heroin in conjunction with pain pills. The unfortunately worse news is that for the first 3 quarters of 2015, we were number 1 in the state as far as numbers of deaths. So we had 40 deaths. Again, the ratios were about the same.
We've got to deal with it. And this is something, not dealing with your budget, but I've heard a lot of us be talking about this. It's 2 issues, as I gather, but you're the professional, so please get it. First of all, we got to catch the people who's selling it. But we also have to help these people who are addicted to it to get off of it. Is that making it too simple?
Actually,
There's another
a
issue.
little bit it is, because it's more multifaceted than that, honestly. And this is where our partnerships are incredible. So part of it is we need to reduce the number of people who are actually starting to take heroin, okay? And it turns out that 80% of current heroin users say that they actually started with abusing prescription pills.
Heard that all the
okay?
time,
So one of the things that I think we do really well and that we're gaining a foothold on, is with Chief Severa. He actually sat and was a very active member of the governor's task force on prescription drug abuse. One of the things he's done is there is a drug take back box in every single precinct here in Virginia Beach. I don't know if anyone else in the state is doing that. And because 2/3 of the opioids, the pain pills that people are abusing, come from friends and family members, think someone's teenager going over to their friend's house and going through the medicine cabinet and pulling out meds, okay? So if you have a prescription, once you're done with it, you need to get rid of it if you haven't finished it, and if you were given pain pills for something that you really only needed 3 days of pain pills for, but they gave you a 30-day supply, best thing you can do is go and dump them in the box. And I challenged myself to step up to this because I was going out and talking to high school students. I went to 4 different high schools. I thought, wow, how easy is it to do it? And so I cleaned out my medicine cabinet. I went into the 3rd precinct. Sure enough, they're like, oh yeah, just turn left. You go in, you put it right there. So that's one thing. Another thing is dealing, educating us physicians. We really should not be giving out as much pain medicine as we are giving out, okay? And one of the things that actually our Health Services Advisory Board is looking at is doing some education at Centera's annual meeting. Also the CDC just came out with new standards and guidelines for prescribing for chronic pain. So there's a lot being done in the education there. But yes, we also need to bust the drug dealers. We need to stop that, and we need to.
Dave, let's get let's get up to date and see what we're doing to aggressively. We don't want to be a number 1 on that list.
No, we don't.
But,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, and I tell you, I'm very heartened to hear you talk about the medical professional aspect of it. I mean, I know, for example, my daughter was in college. She had a sore throat, the JMU Student Health Center was closed, so she went to the urgent care in the hospital there. They just automatically gave her 10 Percocets, and that's ridiculous. And then you take a look at, we had a city employee that I talked to who had a workers' comp related surgery. They gave her 30 Percocets, but they would not give her the antibiotics yet because that was controlled. And
really?
There's something wrong here.
I agree.
Where that's coming not only from workers' comp, but coming from doctors. And I think obviously, based on what you're saying, that 80% of them are coming from prescription drug abuse, then that's something, that's really the key right there, is to stop it at the medical professional. And I'm heartened to hear you say that. That's
I wholeheartedly agree.
Bobby?
Yeah, as we, move forward with, creating a healthcare complex and everything, this could be a key location for a place, a facility that actually may help, with the detox and, some of the other things, create a rehab scenario as part of our comprehensive medical approach that we're looking at through your initiative, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
Boy,
Amelia?
that excites me to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about the Revive.
Yes.
That's coming up, the education to the Human Services.
Yes.
having that. And I'm so pleased our
Bad stuff.
police and that group are right on it. And also the economic standards of the people who are taking these.
It goes across the board. It's everybody. It's everybody. And the scary thing, gosh, with the heroin use, over the past 10 years, the rate of women using heroin has doubled. The rate of Caucasians using heroin has doubled. The rate of 18 to 24-year-olds using heroin has doubled. It is scary. It goes across all socioeconomic strata. It is very disconcerting. So I do believe that if we as a medical profession can significantly reduce our inappropriate use of pain medications, if we can, in conjunction with that, then you want to make sure that the police and the court systems have mechanisms in place to catch the dealers and address that. And then you do education and outreach to everybody and anybody, to discuss, really what problems this brings. And then you also have mental health treatment for substance use disorders. The combination of all of those give us a fighting chance to address this epidemic. And it's
Faith-based groups.
and faith-based, yeah, definitely. I mean, the Revive, with Human Services, they're having their very first training tonight. And I was just talking to Eileen out there. They had 15 slots. They filled them all up. They've got a waiting list for the next training. We brought partners together about 2 years ago to start this discussion and to start looking into Revive while it was still a pilot program up in Richmond and Southwest, and then Human Services took the lead and they've really run with it. It's excellent. And I do believe with Chief Severa, I think we're the only police department in the state that is carrying the naloxone. And I know I talked to him within the first 2 weeks of them deploying it, they had 2 saves. So we're on the right track with a multifaceted approach.
But we're number one at the wrong one.
Yeah, I know.
We got to
I know.
fix that.
It is scary.
Even more so as
You're
a
right.
percentage from, because out in the western part of the state with everybody in the coal industry and things like that, I know there's a high percentage of abuse out there.
Well, and I will say, so we have the highest number, and that's due in part to the fact that we have, 450,000 citizens. We do not have the highest rate. Okay, but we do have the highest absolute number. Now, in regards to the first 3 quarters of 2015, so we had 40 opioid and heroin deaths. Norfolk had 39. They've got half our population, so that's double our rate.
Yeah, but we don't want any of them.
Yeah.
We got to, it's just something bad. Shannon?
With the naloxone and some of the other interventions that we're doing, it begs my question of, do we have, once we save them and do we have the facilities and the ability here to get them through treatment and help them get to that next level? 'Cause that's the hard part.
Not currently. We don't have the full capacity. I mean, we've got the recovery center, which is wonderful, and it's very nice that we have that, but I believe there's under 30 beds there.
Facility.
Yeah, we do. We really do. Oh, boy, I'll jump on that task force immediately, and I know someone.
Seriously, I think, that's something we can, Amelia and I were in a meeting recently, and we suggested the possibility of what you just said. We're going to have that extra space in the building we're building at Wichita, and maybe we can.
Boy, that would be wonderful.
Really, it's just a possibility, but something
Yeah.
to certainly think about.
Yeah, and I know Danette's out there with all of her crew. I'm sure she'd be thrilled to hear that. Dr. Freeman's out there with her.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got the nidus of a group. We'll jump on board.
All
Yeah.
right, what else we got, young lady?
Okay. rolling right along. More happy peppy stuff, okay? Population health. This year, we embarked as a state on the first state health improvement plan entitled Virginia's Plan for Wellbeing. That was a wide variety of departments across the state. And I have to say, I've never been more proud to be from Virginia Beach and a department head here, because I've been at 2 different talks that the Secretary Hazel gave, highlighting the 4 components of this, and I'll really touch on the first 2. With healthy, connected communities, he talked about ending homelessness in our veterans. Well, with Andy Friedman and our beach community, we actually accomplished that goal last year. Now, it's an ongoing goal because more veterans become homeless, but we actually got that down to 0. And with our Housing Resource Center coming on board, with our pinkies out at the beach, we're way ahead of the game, on addressing the homelessness issue. With Strong Start for Children, when Secretary Hazel was talking about it, I immediately thought of Karen Kehoe and Grow Smart, because one of the indicators is that, they want to increase the percentage of 3rd graders who are passing their reading SOL. And they want to get it from the state level of 69% up to 81. I talked to Karen today, our rate's already, or they want to get it from 69 to 80, our rate's 81. We've already, surpassed their indicator, and I know we'll continue trending up. With preventive actions, all that we're doing with our Mayor's Action Challenge regarding healthy eating, active living, the fact that we have amazing parks and recreations, we've got trails and bikeways planned, again, we're ahead of the game. And in regards to systems of health care, there's a big focus on mental health, substance abuse, and we just talked about that. And last but not least, access to care. Again, thanks to your generous funding, we're able to provide dental services for uninsured people. We primarily provide our dental services to children on free and reduced lunch, and we had over 1,000 visits last year. With our maternity program, we assisted nearly 400 women last year, many of whom we were able to link and enroll in Medicaid and then get to private providers out in the community, the remainder of which we took care in our shop. And then our baby care, our new program, we've hired our supervisor and she's been trained. She's now in the process of working on recruitment for the other 5 positions, and we hope to start serving clients in the summer. And then last but not least, my baby, the health insurance marketplace, again, collaboration with the departments of libraries, human services, communication, the support from the city manager's office. Over the past 3 years, we've been able to make nearly 1,500 direct contacts, had 30 enrollment sessions, had our hotline open, and special thanks to Mayor Sessoms and Councilwoman Kane and Councilman Dyer and the Human Rights Commission for awarding our team the Meyer E. Oberndorf Award for Achievement, the Government Achievement of Excellence. I think I got that a little wrong. I'm sorry. I'm trying to go fast because I know you guys are ready to be out of here. But thank you. That's been honestly the highlight of my career so far, is just knowing that we made that impact, and just getting a nice little pat on the back always just makes you feel like, yes, we're doing the right thing. So thank you so much for that. And that's all I've got. So are there any other questions?
Any questions or anything? We certainly
Thank you.
we certainly thank you for everything you're doing. Really do.
Thank you.
And we really will work on this heroin thing. We got to get this thing under control.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right.
One more briefing, sir. I've got Danette Smith and her team. They've been anxiously awaiting to get in here to complete their presentation.
I'm working with this a few minutes.
And where we are,
Danette, we're glad to have you.
Glad to
Doc,
be here.
how are you?
Thank you so much for having us this evening.
We're glad
I
to-
thought that I would take a 2-minute commercial break for me to introduce my staff, but for me also to have them answer some questions about what's going on with heroin addiction and how the department is actually addressing that.
Please.
So let me first go around and introduce everybody to you. I have Adam Zombowski, who's my media and communications person, Galen Thomas, Deputy Director of Social Service, Eileen Smith, my cousin, who's over the CSB, Dr. Rudolph Freeman, who's over our medical services, Dawn Reichart, who is my budget person, Dr. Kirkland, who's over CQI, and finally Eddie Anton, who's over human resources. So let me have Eileen just
Welcome,
address for you what's going on tonight with Revive. And so I asked her to speak a little bit about that, and then also Dr. Freeman.
Okay, you want to come up?
Yep.
Please, thank you very much.
Wonderful. We're one of the first in the state to do a Revive training. It's a training for lay people, so it's a training for a family member. We give them a kit so that they know how to do the atomizer. It's actually something that goes up the nose. There's also a very expensive way to do it, which is an injection, but we're doing the kit that is up the nose for them to easily be able to administer the naloxone. They also get a CPR mask. They are actually training on mannequins tonight, so it's about a 2-hour training, and then they'll be set to go.
Jim?
So you're saying that you're giving naloxone to citizens to administer?
No, it's a prescription. They have to go get a prescription for it. So they get a prescription and they can go get it from a pharmacy. We're giving them a kit to use. So the prescription that they get would go into the atomizer. We just give them the atomizer.
So where do they get the prescription from you all?
No, from a pharmacy. It's actually.
Yeah, but who writes the prescription?
It's actually written by a physician that was with the state, the Department of Behavioral Health. Did you want to answer that too? Yeah.
What the state did in terms of changing the statute was to allow for what they call a standing order. And any physician, without worrying about concerns about immunity and that sort of thing, of negligence, can now write a standing order to support this program. So for a lot of the state CSBs, they're doing that route. I'm not sure how the police is getting their procurement because they're doing it.
That's my concern, because obviously EMS has more training than police do, but when you administer this drug to someone who's overdosing on heroin, they wake up, and if you do it beyond just getting them breathing again, they wake up and they're combative. I mean, are you teaching people to not administer enough so that they don't wake all the way up?
And part of the reason they're using the atomizer is they're trying to do manage the dosage, because if you give too much naloxone, not only do they wake up, then they go through withdrawal. And what they do is it's just enough to allow for them to be revived. They get training about things like CPR, so that if the person needs rescue breathing assistance, they can help with that. And then there's a mechanism that they've developed to identify those folks who've received this, so that if a first responder like EMS comes on the scene, they'll know that they've received that medication.
Yeah, I'm just more worried about the combative nature of somebody coming out of this and getting somebody hurt who doesn't realize that that's a possibility when they're going through this training.
Exactly.
Who pays for the prescription? Is it something that their insurance picks up, or how's that paid for?
That I am actually unsure of. Do you know, Dr. Freeman?
Initially, when the group first got together about 2 years ago, the state had a grant for this, and I think what they've done is they've expanded on the grant to allow CSBs to purchase this and do the community training.
Do they sign some type of waiver that if something goes wrong that we're okay? I mean, is there a waiver that they sign?
Basically, the person who is doing it is supposed to be immune from any of that. However, if a person does not want to stay with the person that they've administered the naloxone to, there is something in the packet that they put with the individual that says, I've been administered naloxone. So when the EMTs show up, they should call 911. All of that is in the training. But when the EMTs show up, they see that someone has already been administered naloxone if they don't stay. And that depends on who the person is. But this is for family members tonight. It's the first 15. I think maybe a CSB in the northern part of the state is the only other one who has started this. The ones around here, we wanted to get our feet wet before some of the other CSBs came to a training. We have a couple trainers that we've trained in-house to do more of these trainings.
And there's 5 trainers that are helping to facilitate this event tonight is someone from the police, someone from EMS, and I think then we have 2 people from Human Services, and then there's a 5th person. I'm not sure where they're coming from. But they're going to do all of the trainings together so that, again, they can collaborate and make sure they're being consistent with how they do the training. If no additional questions for Eileen about Revive, Danette asked me just to kind of give you a brief overview about the Crisis Stabilization Detox Center that Dr. Colbert mentioned earlier, the Recovery Center that's now called Pathway Center at Burtneck. It is a resource that probably needs to be expanded. We only have capacity for 17 beds. She had said 30, but it's only 17. And 14 of those beds are tied into this regional reinvestment project through the Community Services Board for people leaving acute inpatient psychiatric hospitals and they have mental health problems. And 4 of those beds are tied to straight detox services. We work with the outpatient services programs. We also work with our day treatment program to have a continuum of care and services so when they get their detox done, they can also be engaged with mental health services. I've been with the city now for 6 years. That program has transitioned from a social detox program almost exclusively for alcohol back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s to a more medically supervised detox program that started in the 90s. And now it's almost exclusively opiate. Part of that's because the state has mandated that opiate addiction gets priority in terms of consumers. That's good, but what it has created is a deficit in our capabilities of also treating people aggressively with alcohol problems. And although there's a high rate of mortality associated with opioid addiction, there's also still equally a high rate of mortality for folks with alcohol because of seizures and things of that nature. So it's constantly being utilized throughout the region by all of the 9 jurisdictions as part of the reinvestment program. But we are limited because of the physical footprint of the center. It was built back in 2002. But again, clearly there's a great need in this community and it needs to be expanded.
Where is it on Burton?
It's on right beside the Law Enforcement Academy. If you go down that back driveway, it's in the back of that. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, Adam, I think we're ready. In our budget for the Human Services Department, we requested $112 million. And one of the things I'd like you to know is that Dawn had an opportunity to go back and take a 5-year look back on our budget, both the revenue and what our expenditures were. So this year, as we move forward, we are continuing to work on the infrastructure of the department, but we're also trying to make sure that we have a budget that truly reflects our spending and the revenue that we're capturing. You will notice on the budget slide that there's some areas that are in red where we've decreased the amount of our budget. The $2 million represents us really looking at benefits over the last 5 years that were overstated, and so we've adjusted that, and that looks at our foster care payments to both foster parents, adoption stipends, as well as independent living and respite care dollars. We've also tried to look at ways in which we could be more efficient with some of our savings, and that's travel, postage. So we've looked at those things to back those kinds of dollars out of our budget, as well as this year we're going to spend a great deal of time with the Budget Management Office and looking at our contractual manpower. A third of our department, we are approximately 1,500 staff, and a third of that is contracted manpower. And so one of the things that we are trying to do this year is to really look at where is it that we really need to have contracted manpower. Many of the contracted manpower positions are in our most critical programs, which is our ICFs. And so we want to look at opportunities where we can take some vacancies, fill those vacancies, first reclass the vacancies, have those vacancies filled, and then back out the contracted dollars and not spend to the level of contract dollars that we're spending right now. The next slide just simply focuses on, and it's really simple for my department, on the revenue that we are able to achieve. Again, it's straightforward. Most of our revenue comes from federal and state as well as fee collection. We are very pleased that the city continues to support us at a 31.6%, and we appreciate that you put in our budget. As I mentioned earlier, you'll notice that the majority of our expenses is in the personnel area, and hence why we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at our contracted manpower. Again, as I stated earlier, we are 1,500 staff. A lot of our effort is not just going to be spent on contracted manpower, but we also have the need to do recruitment of nurses for our ICF as well as psychiatrists. And I know that the mayor has been helping us, thank God, with that with EVMS. Well, I want to thank you for the two areas that you've really allowed us to expand on. One is the Witch Duck Annex. We've moved our programs into the Witch Duck. We moved in July and August. That's going well. I think that we're going to be great neighbors with the Family Resource Center, so we're looking for that to come up and be a part of that on the third floor. The second area that we've been able to expand in is the PAC program. When I came to you last year, we received $800,000 from the state to do a PAC program that would really service the significant, severely mentally ill persons. Now we've been able to receive an additional $200,000 that is going to allow us to focus on those persons who are coming out of state mental hospitals, as well as those who are coming out of correctional facilities. So here's what's on tap for us for the next fiscal year. I will be spending a great deal of my time on developing with Adam and Dr. Kirkland a strategic plan. We've had so much going on my first 2.5 years, I just haven't had the chance to do a strategic plan. And what I hope to do over the next 2 to 3 years is to really look at how we do community engagement as a strategy in developing a strategic plan that gives vision and input from the community on the services that we're going to be providing. We're also continuing our relationship with CHKD, that public-private partnership. We're beginning to look at not only the work that they're doing with us under foster care, but we're also beginning to look at telemedicine and telepsychiatry as other solutions to help us serve the children in Virginia Beach. The next slide focuses on two major areas that Eileen is focusing on the CSB. One has to do with a new program that is being mandated, I guess we would say, from the state on the developmental services waiver redesign, where the city is now going to be the portal of all services for people who are in need of developmental services. We will actually be doing the assessment. We will be doing the portal and referring those particular citizens for services, either with us or within the community. There is a substantial data collection piece to this, and so Dr. Kirkland and Eileen will be working together on that information. And then finally, we are retooling our adult outpatient services for the reasons that you heard from Dr. Kirkland, Eileen, and Dr. Freeman today. We have to have a more robust mental health system to serve adults. Our system right now isn't as robust as it needs to be, and so we're looking at opportunities to retool that, which would look at integrated medicine, which means having a physician as well as a psychiatrist on staff, and same-day appointments and walk-in appointments, which right now we don't necessarily have in place. On the social service side, Galen has been focusing on CSA, and we all remember that. And I'm pleased to say to you that our leadership team is in place. We have hired a CSA administrator and coordinator, and we're now at a point where we're ready to look at utilization review. The state came down last month, gave us some feedback on our plan, and I think they were pretty satisfied with the direction that we're going in. Dr. Kirkland is working with us on all of our automated systems that have to do with paper. Remember, I came to you, I think there was a news article about we had paper all over the office at our 3432 location. Well, I'm proud to say that we've moved that into an electronic storage system. And we will be coming back to you in May to talk about that specifically. That the majority of our benefit cases are now being stored in an electronic system, as well as he's helping us with meaningful use, which means that for our physicians who are using the electronic system, we get paid for that through the federal government. And we've been able to collect about 250,000? 244,000 for the use by our prescribers in using the electronic system. Dr. Freeman can't speak enough about the work that he's doing with EVMS. He's helping us look at a couple of strategies. One, recruitment of psychiatrists that we desperately need. Two, really kind of developing a robust internship that would allow for third-year medical students to do their community mental health and psychiatry rounds with us, as well as EVMS has talked to us about also expanding into looking at physician assistants, art therapists, and psychologists. So we're looking to expand that. Those are all positions that we need within the department to be successful. Human resources, as I said earlier, we are focusing on contracted manpower, but we're also focusing on recruitment of medical staff, both psychiatry and nursing. And then finally, Dawn is working to make sure that we have standard operating procedures that look at fiscal controls and making sure that we are monitoring and managing our money appropriately. And that's it for me.
Questions or comments, please? Emilio?
Well, first, congratulations on bringing in some money to do with that electronic, because I went through there and they named it a snake. And I tell you, it was quite going through all of that paper and to see the results. Also, wanted to ask you a little bit about, because you mentioned you have about a third
Yes.
contractual. And
Right.
here you have about to reduce dependence on contracted manpower. Explain a little bit about that.
What we're hoping to do is to be able to look at how we utilize contracted manpower. There are some positions that are used as staff, okay, in our intermediate care facilities. And then there's some contractual positions that are used to support the department. What we're hoping to do is to be able to look at the vacancies. Use the vacancies whenever necessary, reclass them so that we could use the vacancies to fill our contractual position.
Thank you.
we're hoping
And
to-
Mayor, I am going to Richmond tonight, as I told you, for the state board meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I will mention the efforts you have put in helping them with EVMS partnership from our mayor. So thank you for what you do for Department of Human Services.
Thank you. Bobby?
Oh, thank you, and thank you and your wonderful staff. Obviously, in today's tough times, you know, the need for health and human services is growing exponentially. Then at a briefing we had a couple of months ago, you mentioned the volume of requests that your staff handles per month. Could you give that number real quick?
Is that for benefits?
Yeah, for benefits and everything. The
Okay.
total amount of,
Okay. For benefits, we're averaging a caseload of about 15,000 for SNAP. For Medicaid, it can be anywhere from about 27,000 applications to 30,000 applications
and is that
That's-
per month?
per month.
Per month.
We're processing that many. The volume is huge. In terms of child welfare, I think the statistics I gave you was that we had approximately 183 open investigations. We have approximately 245 children in foster care, and Galen's working with staff to make sure that we really have children reach permanency. That's why we're doing the work with CHKD. On the mental health side, at any given time, Eileen is serving close to 17,000? Close, okay.
About 12,000 a year.
Year.
And in ES, about 3,000 calls a month.
So we're very busy.
It's an
And-
astronomical volume,
Yes.
what they do.
And without the contracted manpower, we would have difficulty providing those services, but what we really need to have is full-time positions, because some of the positions are critical to the work that we do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shannon?
Danette, how is the relationship in the medical with CHKD?
Oh, I think that's going well. Quite honestly, with CHKD, because of that relationship, it's allowed us to begin to explore some other relationships. For example, we're going to be having a meeting with Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's some interest from Magellan to look at how they can better serve on the mental health side or behavioral health side the children that we're serving. So that relationship is going well. With CHKD, we started the program of the medicals getting done in February. To date, we've had between 25 to 30 children who've come through to get the assessment. So it's going very well, but it's also bringing a variety of different partners to the table, and that's good.
Other questions or comments? We all are busy, that's for sure, but we certainly thank you for you and your entire team for everything you're doing, and we are delighted to see the progress, and we're right here to support you any way we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stanley,
Okay.
thanks, everybody.
Council, you got anything else? We're out of here.
Come on.